platform should look like across the country, including here in Massachusetts? Or is it a radical prescription for disaster?
I'm Marjorie Egan, and then it's our Friday media analysis segment, Press Play with Eric Deggans, the Knight Chair in Journalism and Media Ethics at Washington Lee University and a critic at large at NPR. We'll discuss Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's tirade against the media and whether artificial intelligence can ever be made to align with journalistic ethics. It's all ahead on the 11 o'clock hour at BPR on GBH and NEPM, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The U.S. Supreme Court has handed President Trump a major victory in his effort to end birthright citizenship. In a 6-3 decision, the justices ruled that the federal courts lack broad authority to grant nationwide injunctions, but did not weigh in on the constitutional merits of Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship. Amanda Frost, a legal scholar at the University of Virginia, spoke to NPR shortly after the ruling was handed down this morning.
As a result of this decision, now while individual plaintiffs could win relief, each and every person affected would have to sue in order to get relief. And in other words, an administration that's violating the law could lose a case and yet nonetheless apply the policy across the nation.
Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship aims to deny citizenship to U.S.-born children of people living in the country without legal status. In a separate case, the Supreme Court upheld the provision of the Affordable Care Act that provided free preventive care for millions of Americans. The vote was 6-3, with Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh joining the court's 3 liberals in the majority. The Chancellor of Germany says the European Union should do a, quote, quick and simple trade deal with the U.S. rather than a slow and complicated one. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports.
Speaking at a summit of EU leaders in Brussels, where European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen unveiled the latest U.S. proposals, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said the clock is ticking, businesses are in danger, and there's no time to negotiate a sophisticated new trade agreement. European industries, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, cars, agricultural products, and wine are already being burdened with 10% tariffs. They could go higher if no agreement is reached with the Trump administration. The EU is also on the cusp of signing a major trade accord with Latin America's Mercosur bloc. France has opposed that deal, but may be ready to compromise given the free trade problems with the U.S. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
The Pentagon has announced that the U.S. Navy is changing the name of one of its ships. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the USNS Harvey Milk will be renamed the Oscar V. Peterson. He says the decision was made to take the politics out of ship naming.
We're not renaming the ship to anything political. This is not about political activists, unlike the previous administration. Instead, we're renaming the ship after a United States Navy Congressional Medal of Honor recipient.
Harvey Milk was a pioneering gay rights activist. On Wall Street, the Dow was up 310 points. This is NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Families on the South Shore are mourning the loss of a sports complex in Hingham that was destroyed in a 4-alarm fire overnight. Parents and kids will now miss summer programs at the building that housed sports camps and birthdays for 25 years. Sean Cummings says his kids benefited greatly from everything offered inside the complex.
They're not just trying to make you an excellent soccer player or if you're playing another sport. They want you to be a great person. They want you to be a community leader. That's what they really focus on. They have sessions outside of sports to just focus on the education aspect of soccer and life.
Officials say nobody was inside the building when the fire started late last night. No injuries are reported. They say it appears the blaze started in the kitchen. Now they're trying to figure out how it started. MBTA police are investigating a tragedy on the Worcester line. They say a 14-year-old girl was struck and killed on the tracks last night. Investigators say she was with a group of teens trespassing on the tracks when the incident occurred. They don't suspect foul play. The victim's name has not been released. Boston University says it will conduct an external review of the athletic department's policies after a prominent podcaster accused a former soccer coach of sexually harassing her when she played for the Terriers. Alex Cooper said in a documentary that former coach Nancy Feldman, quote, fixated on her, and she says BU declined to review the notes her mom compiled detailing her complaints. BU says the school also investigated former coach Casey Brown after a player complained about being mistreated by her last season. And the university says the probe did not reveal any misconduct on Brown's part, but she resigned in December. 70 degrees, sun, clouds in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include AG1, introducing AG1 Next Gen, a daily drink with vitamins, minerals, and probiotics to support overall health. Learn more at drinkag1.com/science.
Here's your Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to BPR and GBH. Thank you. And NEPN. We are live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back here on Monday. Well, actually, we'll be in Brighton on Monday, but then we are off for the July 4th week after that. The Attorney General will be with us at the Boston Public Library, and we are back on vacation 11 to noon on July 9th. We're actually back, I think, on the 7th, are we not?
That is correct, Marjorie.
Okay. Hello, Jim.
Let me tell you something. I have a feeling I'm going to be like a puddle of goo by 2 o'clock. Based upon how well this morning has gone so far.
Yeah.
By the way, the good news is we have fabulous music.
We do.
From a jazz group at noon. But at 12:25, retired federal judge Nancy Gertner will join us to dissect this momentous decision by the Supreme Court, in my opinion at least, limiting the power of the federal courts to stand up to the unconstitutional executive orders of Donald Trump. He just posted on Truth Social, in capital letters, giant win. And I would argue procedural things often don't translate for people, but I would argue it's a giant win for him from his 6 conservative justices yet again. But again, Nancy Gertner, former judge, will join us at 12:25.
That's right. But on the bright side, you won't have to pay thousands of dollars for your preventable care because they're not going to take that away from Obamacare.
That is good.
That is good. That's a little hope there.
That is good. In any case, since Trump's victory in November, or really since it became clear that Biden couldn't possibly run again, Democrats have been struggling with something of an identity crisis, caught between mostly young progressives looking to invigorate their party's priorities in the direction of Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez, and many, mostly older, more centrist members of the party, or at least cautious members of the party, anxious about alienating large swaths of the country. One thing most Democrats seem to agree on, something is not working. A Quinnipiac poll earlier this month found that just 21% of voters fully approve of the job congressional Democrats are doing. Democrats don't like the job that Democrats are doing. Enter New York Democrat candidate for mayor, Zohran Mamdani. The 33-year-old won the primary this week against establishment candidates, most notably Cuomo in New York, yet on a platform of affordability in terms of freezing rents, free busing, no-cost childcare. Our number is 877-301-8970. Call or text. Do you see the future of the Democratic Party in young, more left-leaning leaders like Mamdani or Ocasio-Cortez? Or do you think that Mamdani and his agenda is a radical trip to hell for the Democratic Party? 877-301-8970. I have never heard him speak. All I've heard are little snippets on the news. He was on with Aaron Burnett on CNN for about, I'd say 20 or 25 minutes last night.
It's very charismatic.
He was not only charismatic,
really good,
but made proposals that Cuomo, for example, were saying radical. I'm almost going to channel you here, as mainstream as they get. For example, Burnett asked him about his freezing of rent proposal. Here's a little bit of what Mamdani had to say.
That's not something that requires any fiscal output from the city. It's something that's determined by the Rent Guidelines Board, composed of 9 members. The mayor picks each of those members. They determine each year whether rents rise or whether they stay the same. The previous mayoral administration froze the rent 3 times, so this has clear historical precedent.
So you're saying Adams?
No, this is prior
Okay,
to Adams. He's the current one who has raised it 9% on those same New Yorkers, pushing them out of their homes.
Meaning de Blasio froze rent too. So there's a proposal that doesn't require a tax increase, even though he admitted that a tax on big corporations and an increased tax on millionaires in Newark would be needed to fund free childcare and free bus service. But as you might say, who is not supportive of a tax on the biggest corporations and wealthy individuals to fund the cost of childcare?
Well, here's the thing. We've allowed this idea that it's radical to get help with childcare when people can't afford childcare, they can't afford their rent, so they can't afford their health care, they can't afford anything because the United States become practically unaffordable unless you're really loaded. Here's what's radical to me in the face of all that. And by the way, the world's richest people, this is a great little story in the Washington Post quoting Oxfam America, the world's richest 1% have increased their wealth by $33.9 trillion since 2015. And with $33.9 trillion, you know what all those rich people could do?
No.
They could end worldwide poverty 22 times over.
You know what they're doing instead? Did you read the end of the article? That's what they're spending on gifts at the Bezos wedding
well,
in
exactly.
Venice.
So to me, the radical thing is when so many Americans are struggling, not just working class people, middle class people. Actually, in Boston, people that are making good salaries are struggling because everything has become so expensive. What's radical is at that particular moment we are poised to make the biggest transfer of wealth in our history from the poor and the middle class to the wealthiest Americans. I mean, that's what's radical. That's what's kind of crazy. And so he's talking about people being able to afford their lives in New York City, which is expensive, but you can't afford your lives in a lot of other places too. So I think we have it backwards on where the radicalism is.
Well, you know what also he did, and I did more research last night after I saw him for the first time on CNN, is his whole campaign is about affordability. That's 100% affordability, even if you don't agree with every detail. And you know what's interesting? When he was Adams yesterday, who should be in jail, the current mayor, had he not cut a deal with Donald Trump in one of the most outrageous extrajudicial things I've ever seen several months ago. When he was attacking Adams, what I would have done, which obviously didn't work in the presidential election, nor would it work in this race, is talk about the fact that the guy is a felon in waiting and he was only spared because of his relationship with Trump. He never mentioned the Trump situation. He talked about how he had done nothing to make New York City more affordable, in fact, had made it more expensive,
right.
Basically not making the same mistakes that, in retrospect, Kamala Harris did in the presidential race. The guy is really prepared. He is a really appealing young character. And that's the one thing I'll say before I get to the calls. What is totally clear with me, you know, the other day when that guy Garcia, who I think is 47, I think from California, beat out our own Steve Lynch as the Democratic leader of the most important committee in many ways in the House, the Oversight Committee. I think it had everything to do with a 47-year-old versus a 70-year-old.
Well, I think there's a sense that people, older Democrats, don't get the crisis that younger people are facing. You know, we talk about the economy being the biggest issue. It's the economy, the economy, the economy. Well, what are they talking about half the time? It's not the economy. And this guy's talking about the economy. By the way, he's a democratic socialist. Everybody gets really scared about socialism. And he's a democratic socialist, like Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist. And when we talk about when we do our list of the happiest countries in the world, where people have the most the social safety nets, where they have decent housing, decent health care. What are all those countries? They're socialist countries. So, you know, this is not socialism, straight socialism, it's democratic socialism.
Well, it's a scary term, is the whole point. They're trying to make it
scary,
even scarier.
I guess, if you lived in Castro's Cuba and you went to Florida and you escaped Castro's Cuba. But I don't know why people are so scared of it. It's not communism, it's socialism.
Oh, I have an answer to that.
What?
People are dopes. That's the reason.
I think people don't know what socialism is.
877-301-8970. So is the Mamdani agenda the agenda that could rescue the Democratic Party from extinction, or would it cause even further harm, as many of the establishment Democratic figures are? We should also say Mario Cuomo, in addition to be old news, Andrew Cuomo, former governor. The reason he was the former governor, if people were not paying attention, is because he was credibly accused of at least 11 instances of sexually harassing women as governor, and then was aptly endorsed by somebody who has worse charges against them, I would argue, the former President of the United States, Bill Clinton. I'm assuming that didn't help with young voters. 877-301-8970. Derek and Weymouth, you're first. Hi.
Hi. But the political scientist in me has to agree with you that the definition of socialism is hilariously misunderstood and purposely misrepresented here.
Exactly.
But I'm a Massachusetts resident. I found myself in New York on Tuesday wishing I could vote. And I just wanted to point out that in an age where people are rightly concerned about anti-Semitism, how about the ridiculous level of Islamophobia, which has been deployed against this guy, and no one seems to be complaining about that.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up. One, he's a Muslim, and two, he has said, I think, the same kind of things we've said on this show about what's happening to Palestinians in Gaza. He's gone on to say he thinks Netanyahu should be jailed. The one place where he's gotten himself into some trouble is this line about globalizing the Intifada.
Yeah.
He believes he says it's about liberation for Palestinians. Critics, as I'm sure you know, Derek, say it's a call to violence. He's going to have to do some explaining there. Did you have any takeaways? Did you talk to people when you're in New York City on Tuesday?
I mean, I was with a relatively young, hip crowd. I think the vibe is very much in his favor.
Yeah.
I'm not that age myself, but I'm absolutely sick of the corporate Democrats, and a lifelong Democrat. I'm not going to vote for that party anymore unless they stop being Republican light and actually, do something progressive.
Well said there, Derek. Thank you so much for the call. What was the line that Ted Kennedy used once about a moderate Democratic proposal? The Democratic Party said is becoming the left wing of the Republican Party, which I think is where Derek was going. By the way, if you're in the audience and want to comment here, so you don't have to make a call or a text, Nia, our colleague, who's sitting right there, who I think raised their hand or some such thing, is happy to talk to you, and you can make comment directly.
Here's Benjamin in Brighton in a text. Older Democrats don't get how bad things are. My own mother bemoaned a third-floor addition for apartments on top of a small business in my unaffordable hometown. I mean, look at the NIMBYism we've had, talking about trying to do all the housing by T-stops. Not that much, but we did have significant stuff from a lot of the towns. Milton was leading the way and that kind of thing.
Hey, you don't have to answer this question because obviously it's a private matter for them. You have a kid and a kid-in-law now in New York City.
They're ecstatic.
Oh, they were, okay.
Ecstatic.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're 30-somethings, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just 30-something.
Sean in Boston, hi.
Hey, guys, how are you?
We're excellent, thank you.
Good. Hey, I just want to make a comment. It just feels like, the journalists are making these comments about that are so far. I'm sorry, I got to turn my radio off on the back.
Thanks.
Okay.
Are you there, Sean?
His radio is probably in his car. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yep, perfectly.
Yep.
Go.
All right. So I just want to make the comment. It feels like the journalists, make these inflammatory comments on both sides, more for entertainment and to rile people up than actually trying to solve the problem. We really need pragmatic, practical compromises. And I would love to see like a Nikki Haley, kind of Pete Buttigieg, combination where the left and the right get together. And look, everyone agrees that, we can't have the borders just wide open, have influx of illegal immigrants. On the flip side, I think everyone agrees that, we don't want our children out there picking the crops. But it just feels like both sides just go to the flame as opposed to actually trying to solve the problem and speak to each other civilly.
Sean, do you know who, I know you know this, you know who signed off on a proposal to virtually close the border that was scotched by candidate Donald Trump, I assume?
Yeah.
Joe Biden.
Again, that's like...
Joe Biden.
Again.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Listen, Joe, under Biden, more people came across that border. And I've read the Wall Street Journal stats in the last 6 months of this term. And I'm digressing. The point is the media needs to start leading people and be thoughtful and talk about real compromise that's going to work for both sides.
Our job. I don't know if you mean opinion people, which I guess we are too. Media's job is to report the facts. Wait, go ahead. I think he's about to criticize us. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, last comment. So I'm a big believer in AI, and I use Claude and Anthropic all the time.
Yep.
Last night I asked Claude, is Donald Trump a good person? And Claude comes back and gives me both sides of the argument. I'm like, Claude, that's totally wrong. You know, this guy's a convicted felon, and then the AI comes back and says, you're absolutely right. It was like, I'm like, well, why did you just say that to begin with? Like, he's not a good person. You could, that's not even an argument. But, but my point is that I feel like the media is more about entertainment and pushing opinions.
Well, Sean, I gotta. What media are you talking about? If you're talking about cable TV, you can't lump everything together. The Wall Street Journal is a conservative paper. It's a fairly serious paper. I don't think they're doing. They have a conservative pro-business op-ed page. The New York Times is much more liberal paper.
But their news is pretty serious and great.
So I really take issue with what you're saying. I think the media, the good media, if you're not talking about Fox News, they lie all the time, and a lot of right-wing people that follow them lie all the time. But I don't buy your whole argument, to tell you the truth, unless you're talking about people fighting on cable TV, and I don't think they should be considered as real journalists because they're not.
Sean, thanks for the call, though. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970. Speaking of Fox News and not telling the people the truth, we read a story this morning that in the past, I don't know, X number of months, well, I guess since the following of the so-called filing of the big, beautiful bill, Fox News has mentioned Joe Biden 10 times more than they've talked about the Medicaid cuts in the reconciliation bill. 10 times more about a former president.
Well, yeah, everybody acts again like this is such a radical thing. Before Ronald Reagan and after World War II, between that whole glorious, American glory years, the 50s, 60s, 70s, before Reagan came in, we had a middle class that was thriving. You had people that we could actually have one person in a family working, father or the mother working, and you could afford a home, and you could afford a car, you could afford to go to college. Things have gotten way out of control. It has to do with the choices in economic policies. Capitalism has to be regulated, and it's not regulated in favor of people anymore. It's regulated in favor of billionaires, which is why we have such huge income inequality problems that keep growing and growing and growing. I mean, when are we going to have the first trillionaire? We're close, aren't we?
Well, they thought, and Musk, until he had Tesla problems, was believed to be on his way. He may be, I don't know. Nick in Hartford, welcome to the show. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hey there. So I just want to echo something that a previous caller said, which I don't think that people are focusing on the attacks on Mamdani enough, and I encourage everybody to call the representative to censure Representative Ogles of Tennessee, who just called for the Attorney General to deport him.
I hadn't heard that. That's pretty great. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and if you recall, this is the same representative who raised money for a children's cemetery that never got built.
Oh, my gosh.
Anyway.
That's right, Nick.
Go ahead.
I forgot about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that Mamdani is the direction of the party, because at the end of the day, people seem to be afraid of this label of socialism, but we have plenty of programs in this country that would be considered socialist. And we're just doing a really bad job of executing it. And I'm kind of sick of Democrats. Republicans are lost. But Democrats who keep trying to win over these mythic middle-of-the-road people and just giving concessions to Republicans of the most extreme in the hope that they seem more reasonable. But there's nothing reasonable about giving all of these handouts to AI companies and billionaires and destroying our environment. We just give people a decently functioning thing, and they won't hate you.
Beautifully put, Nick.
That was good. That was another
you.
Great call. So you could solve Social Security socialism, right? Medicare socialism, right? I think most of us, especially as you get older, really are happy you're going to get Social Security, and you're happy you're going to get Medicare.
We're both fans of Buttigieg. When Pete Buttigieg came to the library a couple of years ago when he was running for president, other than when Mayor Wu got a standing ovation here not too long ago, right after she testified in front of Congress, it was the most embraced any politician I think had ever been on our set. Aiden just points out that Aiden, our colleague, Buttigieg had something interesting to say during the 2020 midterm debate about Republicans, well, it wasn't midterm in 2020, about Republicans calling Democrats socialists. Here's what Buttigieg said.
It's true that if we embrace a far-left agenda, they're going to say we're a bunch of crazy socialists. If we embrace a conservative agenda, you know what they're going to do? They're going to say we're a bunch of crazy socialists. So let's just stand up for the right policy, go out there and defend it.
You know, I have to praise you, if I may. You've been saying for years, maybe since Elizabeth Warren announced her no more than 7% of your income which was embraced on child care, is when that prior caller talked about, trying to pander to moderate or middle income, whatever he said, voters. What could be more appealing to an average middle-class voter? Maybe not free childcare. I don't know if that's affordable for a government or a city, but more affordable childcare, as you would say, that's radical policy?
No, I don't think it's. I don't think it's radical. I know. I don't think reasonable childcare, reasonable rent, reasonable price for a house. I mean, this is all we've created. This. I mean, people talk about the Republicans love talk about Ronald Reagan, what a great guy he was. Well, he's the one that began the mess, of the tax rates before Ronald Reagan. Where we had 70, 80. Like 90% after World War II tax rates. Now what is it, 35% for the richest people in America? Over there in Venice, and they don't like the Bezos because Amazon isn't paying their fair share of taxes most of the years. I mean, billionaires aren't paying. We're like a bunch of nations, a nation of suckers. Other countries, we're the richest country in the world, right? All these European countries, they have reasonable rent. Most of them, I'm generalizing. Reasonable rents, reasonable prices for things. Healthcare, they have healthcare, which is fantastic. Everybody can get their healthcare. Nobody has to worry about the leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States, which is medical bills. I mean, why do we put up with this? I don't know. Anyway,
because we are sheep in this country.
And that's why I think this guy is so attracted to people. He really gave it to, remember in the debates with Cuomo when they were going back and forth and Cuomo was saying how he hadn't been around long enough, he was inexperienced, and the guy says something like, well, I haven't been accused by multiple women of sexual harassment, sexual improprieties. I didn't go after the gynecological records of all these women. I didn't have to resign in disgrace. I mean, he just gave it right back to him. He's 33 years old. Cuomo's 67.
He does have, in all fairness, he has no legislative accomplishments.
No,
he's been there, 4 years, I think?
And he's only passed 3 bills.
He's achieved nothing.
And he's got a big problem, just like Mayor Wu does in Boston. A lot of these ideas he can't get through without another stupid thing, permission from the state legislature.
But he actually has more power in New York City. Home rule stuff is something I'm obsessed with, as you know. I know you are too. There's more power intra-city in New York City, but we got to take a break. We'll explain it in a second.
Okay, we got to take a break. We'll explain it in a second.
We're
talking about why people are so revved up about this new guy.
I think so.
Zohran Mamdani, who surprised everybody in New York City. We'll be right back. You're listening to Boston Public Radio.
Fast fashion's cheap, trendy clothes can land quickly in a donation pile or the trash. Huge amounts of discarded clothing ends up in the Atacama Desert in Chile.
And this become a new illegal business where the people goes and just throw the clothes in the desert.
But there may be a new fix. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Furniture Consignment Gallery, offering luxury pre-owned home furnishings in their locations in Burlington, Natick, Hanover, and Plymouth during their summer kickoff event. Details online at FurnitureConsignment.com. And Bunker Hill Community College, offering 6-week summer mini-sessions to achieve college and skills goals. Sessions start June 1st and July 14th. Registration at bhcc.edu/summer.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Jim Brody and Marge Regan live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Fabulous music in about 30-some minutes. And in about 10 minutes, Eric Deggans from NPR will talk to us about the state of the media. Speaking of state of media, Nora at the BPL, who I think is part of the Endicott College group today, asked about the role of media, especially as a student studying media in Massachusetts. As you said, people, New York Times, Boston Globe, reporters, their job is to inform the public, right. And I think most of them do an incredibly good job.
Yeah, a lot of great print journalism out there. The Atlantic, New York Magazine, a lot of great stuff. Anyway, here she is for her question. Are you there?
Oh, that's you.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were just texting us. Hi, Nora?
Yes, I am.
Can you lower the mic just a little bit so we can hear you? Hi. It works almost as well as everything else is working
Can
today.
I just take it off the stand?
Can you jump up and down while you're asking your question? That would. Go ahead, Nora. We're good.
Yeah, so I'm a student at Endicott College.
Yeah.
I'm a media major.
Yeah.
And I'm a rising junior. And I was just wondering, I hadn't heard of Mamdani before coming here, like the New York mayoral race. I'm from Massachusetts. I live here. But I'm pretty active in like checking the news constantly. My friends will text me to like see what's going on. So I'm always like refreshing my email and stuff. But I hadn't heard much about this mayoral race or, any of the struggles that he's been facing with backlash or anything. So I'm just wondering, like, do you think that he's gotten enough coverage? Not just regionally. I'm sure he gets lots in New York, but for the whole East Coast or, nationally.
Well, in defense of your not knowing about him, I should say he won on Tuesday. He was considered a real long shot. He was running against the former governor, and even though the governor is a credibly accused sexual harasser and everything else, the conventional wisdom he was going to win. He didn't. And so since Tuesday, he has become a huge national story. And I think the primary reason is, as I said at the top, is because the Democratic Party is not respected even by Democrats in the Democratic Party. They're looking for a path to victory, and some think that he's it. Is that a fair response?
Yeah, I think people didn't really know that much about him unless you were living in New York City. And then he was great on social media, like a lot of 33-year-olds are. He walked the whole length of Manhattan.
Right after he won.
And then he did this video, I guess, back in the wintertime, of him jumping into the freezing waters of the Hudson or something to underscore his thing about freezing rents in these subsidized apartments that New York City has. So I think he was just a dark horse, right, that came out of nowhere and won.
But this could be a huge national story starting, I think, Tuesday, in part because he was endorsed by Ocasio-Cortez, who many people are suggesting is the next wave leader of the Democratic Party. And so I think you won't say the same thing in a couple of days. Nora, it's great to meet you.
And talk about
Thanks
the income inequality thing. There's all these stories now about how they're very wealthy in New York City, are beside themselves. They're so upset about this guy. They're going to have to back Eric Adams, who's another guy that is...
Hear what Bill Ackman said? Bill Ackman, who we talk about a lot in Harvard, lives in New York. I will back anybody from the business community who decides to run in this race.
Well, Bill Ackman is one of the people that says he's going to
do Adams?
He's going to contribute hundreds of millions of dollars to a rival,
Eric
Adams.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know it was Adams. My apologies. I thought he said...
And Adams, of course, was taking all this money from Turkey in an illegal way, but his case was dismissed by Donald Trump.
And dismissed by Donald Trump, and to the credit of members of the Justice Department, how many resigned because they refused to go to the court?
Oh, quite a few.
Like 11 or something like that.
They were so appalled.
Principal Justice Department people said, I'd rather end my career than... And who ended up telling the court we're dismissing the charges? His guy Bove, his lawyer, who now he's nominated to be a federal appellate court judge.
And he's the one that also said that the president should ignore court orders.
He denies it, but that is exactly what credible people have said he says.
Kendall in Cambridge, thanks for calling.
Hi, Kendall. Hi.
Yeah, hi. Thanks both. First time, long time.
Thank you very much.
So I just wanted to say, I love Mamdani. Grew up in upstate New York, went to school in the city. I figured it's worth giving Brad Lander his flowers.
Brad Lander's the controller. He's the guy who got arrested at the immigration place the other day, right? And he came in number 3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And, he was a kind of liberal progressive person that he had the opportunity to really turn on Zohran, right? And he didn't. And I'm so proud of him, and I'd absolutely love for him to run for some other kind of office, senator, governor, this kind of thing. He did the thing that I thought Elizabeth Warren should have done.
Meaning
right?
what?
When Bernie was there.
Oh.
When Bernie was there, right, she split the progressive vote.
Well, except, Kendall, in all fairness, Kendall, if I may, there's a different situation. When Sanders and Warren were both running, it was a straight typical election where one of them, whoever got the most votes in that thing, was going to be the winner. New York City has ranked choice. So not only were Lander and Mamdani friendly, they endorsed each other because I'm not going to give people a headache and explain ranked choice voting like we have in Cambridge and some other places, but it allows for less contentious campaigns where people don't have to spend zillions of dollars savaging others like we're seeing here in Boston right now in the mayor's race. Kendall, thanks for the call, though. We truly appreciate it. We should at some point, because ranked choice voting is such a big thing there now, we should talk in the next couple of weeks about ranked choice voting. There's a lot of movements in this country. It's being picked up in a number of places. Quite controversial, as I said. When I was elected to my one illustrious term on the Cambridge City Council, I benefited from it.
Well, I think we need a crusade in the United States of America that
For
people
what?
shouldn't have to work 3 jobs to be able to afford a one-room condo and to get decent health care. Anyway, it's all the time we have. Thanks for your calls and texts. Coming up after this quick break, NPR's Eric Deggans. He's going to join us for our weekly media analysis segment, Press Play. I guess AI is about to ruin everything, Jim, in the press, so people won't have to worry about the media anymore because it's going to be one big AI deal. Anyway, you're Jim Browdy, I'm Marjorie Egan. We're listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, bombs away. I'm not talking about the U.S. missile strikes on Iran. I'm talking about President Trump dropping the F-bomb on live TV. What's the significance of his 4-letter fury becoming a presidential first? Plus, Boston Calling is calling it quits for now. The famed music festival is taking a gap year. We take on that and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise Software Platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And Benchmark Senior Living. Benchmark's Mind and Memory Care program is committed to instilling dignity and independence for residents by offering personalized care plans, working at every resident's pace. Locations and more at benchmarkseniorliving.com.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browder are live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be live on Monday, but then we're off for July 4th break. We're back on the 7th, and on Wednesday the 9th, Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell will join us for an hour to take our questions and yours at the library. And in about 20 minutes, fabulous live jazz at the library. Join us on Zoom for another edition of our weekly media analysis segment, Press Play. Eric Deggans. Eric is Washington and Lee University's Knight Chair in Journalism and Media Ethics. Actually, he's not. He will be Tuesday, July 1st. So he's got to talk fast today. You also know him as a TV critic for NPR. His book is Race Baiter, How the Media Wields Dangerous Words to Divide a Nation. And his Substack is called Switching Codes with Eric Deggans. That's at Eric Deggans, DEGGANS.substack.com. Eric, welcome and congratulations.
Yeah.
Man, you guys got in all the plugs. Thank you so much.
That's right, we did. But
I'm so glad to see you. You guys look like you're on the Today Show or something.
I know, don't we look great?
This
In
is
our
the first time I've been with you on this set. This
That's
is awesome.
right. It's very snazzy. Yeah, we got these big, huge windows on all sides.
I
we
am
have a
so
Newsfeed
impressed.
Cafe across the
Glad
way.
to hear it.
Yeah, we're riding high here at the Boston Public Library, Eric. So, but tell us, what are you going to do? You're going to fix all the problems in journalism and ethics when you're at Washington?
No,
what does the job mean?
Well, what I will be doing is teaching journalism ethics classes at the school. We also have an ethics institute where we have a notable journalist come in and give a keynote speech, and then we have 4 other journalists talk about case studies where they faced important ethical decisions. And many of these presentations are open to the public. So it's not just that the students get to benefit from hearing from these journalists. People from the community can come in and understand how some of the leading journalists make decisions about how they tell them the news of the day. And I can't reveal who the person is that we've booked to be the keynote speaker, but it's an amazing journalist, nationally known. And we're very, very excited. And then on top of that, I hope to be a resource. Roger Mudd, the great journalist, established a separate ethics institute that also is at Washington and Lee. And so I'm hopeful that we'll work together to also create some interesting programs for people in the community, and maybe for Washington and Lee School isn't just journalists; it's also mass communications. So we have people who are working in publicity, we have people working in marketing, we have people who are doing things that are not necessarily journalism, and we also want to help them make ethical decisions as well. So it's all about trying to help the young journalists of tomorrow sort through these issues so that when they go out there into the workplace, they have some tools for how to sort through all the challenges they're going to face.
I assume you'll prepare them how to respond when they're screamed at by the Secretary of Defense. You'll do that? We'll get to him in a minute.
Is there a way to prepare for that?
I
really?
don't know.
I don't know.
Let's get back to that in a minute. You talked, Eric Deggans, you said a minute ago, you're going to talk about how the news is produced and put together so the news of the day is conveyed, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, to the consumer. Sure. Headline in the New York Times, the Washington Post will ask some sources to annotate its stories. I think the feeling is to make it more inclusive, to expand their declining circulation. They will allow sources in certain situations, beginning with climate change stories, to annotate, comment on their stories. In the abstract, it sounds good to me until you realize, at least until I realized, the most quoted sources are the most powerful sources, which for the most part are in the business of trying to manipulate coverage about them. So I think I end up, unless you convince me otherwise, that in concept it's good, in operation it's really dangerous. Where do you fall?
I'm not even sure it's good in concept, to be honest. The whole idea of what we do as traditional journalists is that we are trying to reflect all sides of an issue that we cover. So theoretically, those people are already represented in the story by the journalist if they're doing their job. But what the journalist is supposed to bring is someone who is fair-minded and independent, and looking at all of the information as somebody who does not have a vested interest in the issue that's being discussed. Now, if the people who were covered want to make a statement about that coverage, generally what has happened is they can write whatever they like. They can submit it to the op-ed page. They could ask whoever's doing the story, can you do a little sidebar where you feature, what we've written so that people can see it in our own voice. And then obviously, a lot of these sources have their own platforms. They can fill their web pages and their social media platforms with as much as they want to say about the story that's been covered by them. So I'm not sure I understand what is to be gained by creating some area in the story where the source gets full reign to say whatever they want to say. This source is in the middle of the story and is biased. and people say they're concerned about bias in journalism. Well, then you want, someone who's somewhat removed from the story to be somewhat of a referee and take in all of the information and then present it to the audience in a way that is understandable and maybe gets at the truth of what's going on. Something like that feels like the institution itself is saying we don't necessarily trust our journalists.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Well, I'm convinced.
And I can imagine that there are journalists at the Washington Post who sort of say, there's so many other ways for people to do this.
Yeah.
Why do it in a way that may cast doubt on the actual reporting of the journalists that are employed by the news organization? I don't understand it.
Talking to Eric Deggans from NPR, and as I said on Tuesday, He will be the Knight Chair in Journalism and Media Ethics at Washington Lee University.
So we're moving to Hegseth at this particular juncture?
Why don't we play a little Hegseth's attack on the media yesterday?
People probably heard about this. They didn't actually see it. This press conference with Pete Hegseth yesterday morning. He's, of course, the Secretary of Defense, attacking the reporters that were in the room. Here's some of those opening remarks at this lashing out at reporters, accusing them of bias against President Donald Trump.
It's like in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump. Because you want him not to be successful so bad, you have to cheer against the efficacy of these strikes. Let's take half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it in every way we can to try to cause doubt and manipulate the public mind over whether or not our brave pilots were successful.
I mentioned this because I thought Anderson Cooper on CNN did something very clever last night. The New York Times did it too in the print version. Said all the things that Hegseth said the press didn't say, and then Cooper played exactly what he said, which is the stuff Hegseth said was not said. He's creating this, a lot of straw men, claiming there was no praise of the military, there was enormous praise of the military, and saying the press didn't say A, B, C, or D, and actually Cooper played, the New York Times played, the press saying A, B, C, and D. I don't know if you got a chance to see this, but he really made Hegseth look like the liar.
Well, all I would say is that there's a lot going on in what Hegseth is doing. I would say, first of all, we talked in the earlier answer about this idea that journalists are independent and fair-minded, and that's why they're sorting through all this information and then presenting it to the audience to say, we're experts. We've been covering this for a while. We don't necessarily have a vested interest in the outcome. We got all the information. Here's what we can tell you that we have verified. This is what we think has happened. Now, Hegseth, in his remarks, is suggesting that that is not how modern journalism platforms work, and that they have an agenda that they are not disclosing to their audience, and that they are shading everything they report in order to achieve this agenda that they will not admit that they have. I think most people who work at major media platforms would say that that is not true, and that it is a distortion of the journalism process that serves his interests, because ultimately he doesn't want the public to believe the unflattering information that mainstream news outlets are reporting. I would also note that before he worked for the government, he worked at Fox News. And Fox News, famously wound up paying an almost $800 million judgment for saying that Donald Trump had won the 2020 election when he hadn't, and in the process maligning a voting systems company that eventually sued them. So perhaps he has been used to working at an organization that has, different standards than the New York Times or CNN or the Washington Post. But I think, people who are on the front lines of covering the White House, that is not how they operate. And what seems to be happening there is that he's passing along these, heightened criticisms of journalism that are in line with what a lot of critics of the mainstream press on Fox News have said, but I don't think it's rooted in the truth. And I'm glad to see that there were news outlets that were willing to just say, well, we're not telling you it's our opinion that it's not true. Here's the facts that prove it's not true.
Yeah, but
so then it's up to the audience to kind of, understand that, the Secretary of Defense had a chance to speak to the public about this reporting, and his response was to say a bunch of things that had not been verified, and then in the end turned out to not be true.
I agree with everything you said, except what I would add to that is the percentage of people who are going to read the New York Times piece that Marjorie referenced, the percentage of people who saw Anderson Cooper's, I thought, brilliant response last night that Marjorie referenced, pales next to the number of people who hear Donald Trump say every day, fake news, liars, they're making it up. And Pete Hegseth was trying to be mini Trump yesterday, trying to do the same thing. And we see, Eric, as you know at least as well, not better than we, the public's trust in the media is declining precipitously. What's the antidote for the endless, phony Trump, Hegseth, et cetera, attacks on the media?
Well, I don't think there's a magic bullet, unfortunately. But I do think one thing that mainstream media outlets have to be careful about doing is shooting ourselves in the foot by living down to these criticisms. So it's important to make sure that we've made a good faith effort to report in a fair way and in an accurate way. That doesn't mean that you can't be someone who has learned a lot over a period of time and come to conclusions that are based on facts. If you see someone that constantly misstates the truth over weeks and months and years, and then they say something that has not been proven, it is, I think, entirely appropriate to say, until we figure out the truth of what this person is saying, we have to apply skepticism to it and say, you know, this person has a history of not telling the truth. They've said this thing. We're going to do our best to verify, but you know, we don't know it's true. They just say that it's true.
Well, that's
and you know, I think we have a number of public figures who are trying to suggest that there's a binary process at work where if the reporting is favorable to the administration or favorable to a certain political point of view, then it's accurate, and if it's detrimental, then it's fake news.
Yeah.
And I would hope that the audience can understand that they have a vested interest in presenting the situation that way, and that it's much more complex, and that if you actually watch or read or listen to the reporting that traditional journalists are doing, you know, of course, there will be mistakes made, but you will see that this cartoonish idea of how journalism is working is not what's happening.
Talking to Eric Deggans.
Yeah, you know, one of these great stories from Media Matters pointed out that, speaking of Fox News, that they've hardly mentioned the proposed cuts to Medicaid on Fox News. Sean Hannity, one of their big hosts, said that only the people who are trying to screw the system basically will be hurt, that people who actually need it will get it. That's certainly not true, and they've fixated on Joe Biden. What was it, 55 to 1 ratio, I think, the number of times Biden was mentioned versus the number of times Medicaid was mentioned. They don't, I think, want their listeners to know, or their viewers to know, what could happen to them with this big, beautiful bill. But there was something really upsetting I read, Eric, about AI and what could happen. You know, media companies, particularly newspapers, are struggling so much already. The AI could be the death knell, according to this piece from the Columbia Journalism Review. What did you think of it?
Well, I guess what I would say is, of course, the influence of artificial intelligence is something we need to keep an eye on and something that will have significant impact. But, you know, there is a tendency to sort of be apocalyptic about these things because we've seen how technology has, for example, you know, completely decimated the economic engine of newspapers.
Yes.
And so we want to be careful about not being too sanguine about the impact of this technology. You know, the challenge with applying AI to journalism is that there's a great temptation amongst media platforms that are trying to save money to use AI to actually create stories. And what we've seen is that, you know, if artificial intelligence is used to create, say, print stories for a website, and there isn't someone not only looking over the story just to make sure that there are no grammatical errors in it, but actually fact-checking the story to make sure that the facts it asserts are in the proper context and are correct, you invariably end up with a lot of mistakes because artificial intelligence has not progressed to the point where you can just ask it to create journalism and it can create stuff that is accurate and forward-looking and without mistakes because it's not quite that advanced. And what AI does is vacuum up whatever is out there that it has access to, and then figure out a way to reconfigure it in terms of what you ask for. Now, you can use artificial intelligence to help you, for example, sort through a lot of data that you would use to create a news story. So you could use artificial intelligence to figure out trends in economics, or figure out how to take a complicated budget sheet for a government office and help you quickly digest what's going on there. But then a human is involved in interpreting the data and creating a story from it. A lot of us use artificial intelligence to transcribe interviews.
Yes.
and it saves a lot of time.
Saves a lot of time.
But one of the things I do notice is that, it does occasionally get words wrong. It does occasionally suggest that one phrase was said when a different phrase was said. And sometimes it can suggest that a different phrase was said that completely changes the meaning of the sentence. And so if you're going to quote those, if you're going to use those quotes in a story, you still have to have you have to have a human being check the audio against the transcript and make sure that what the transcript says they said is what they actually said. And so what I think is more likely in the near term is more uses of AI by smart publishers that help reporters, that help journalists. It will still, I think, result in some people losing jobs because you might not need as robust a research staff, at a journalism publication if you're using AI to help you do research. You might not even need as many reporters if you have AI doing transcribing and sorting through data, and even giving you early ideas of how to write a story. But I think what we're finding too is that there's questions about plagiarism. If AI creates a story, it creates a story based by taking all these other stories that already exist and then kind of creating a new version based on all the stuff it's learned from reading all the stuff that already exists. So how likely is it that you're going to get a story that plagiarizes some other story in a way that might open you up to even a lawsuit if you publish it? So, there's still a lot of questions about AI. What we've seen, two really big challenges are that Google is using AI to give users early results on searches that they do, so that if all you want to learn, for example, is how old was Bill Moyers when he passed away, you can do a search on his name, and AI might tell you a few facts about Bill Moyers, so that you don't have to click on an obituary for him, or you don't have to click on a biography from him and go to that website to get that information, which means that those websites are getting less traffic.
Exactly.
Because the information is presented without you having to click through. So that's a huge issue, and some news websites have seen significant drops in readership because of it. The other thing that I've heard that I think is very intriguing is that AI tends to mediocritize content.
Oh.
So if you're used to reading summaries of stories, summaries of columns, summaries of journalism, eventually you may start to think and write in the way that the AI is suggesting. And what it does is it homogenizes everything. Because again, it's scooping up all of this stuff, and it is kind of regurgitating it back in a way that kind of averages out all of the influences. So there are some people who are suggesting that it's kind of homogenizing how people think and how people write, and I am concerned about that. But the flip side is that if you are a unique writer, it makes you stand out more.
Eric, we are out of time. But
Eric,
thank you
congratulations
so much.
on the appointment,
job.
and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's always so much fun to talk to you guys.
Oh,
Have
good.
a great day.
You too.
as well.
We're speaking with Eric Deggans. He's Knight Chair in Journalism and Media Ethics for Washington Lee University. Washington Lee University also reviews TV for NPR. His book is Race Baiter, How the Media Wields Dangerous Worlds to Divide a Nation. Okay, BPR continues here in Boston. NEPM listeners, thanks for tuning in. We're going to hear after the noontime news. Bill McKibben is going to be with us, Nancy Gertner, and today's Supreme Court decisions. You're listening to Boston Public Radio from the Boston Public Library.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Insurance coverage from healthcare experts for businesses, individuals, families, and retirees. Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Learn more at mgbhp.org/everyday. The Next American Masters highlights one of the most fearless political thinkers of the 20th century, whose insights about totalitarianism continue to resonate today. Watch Hannah Arendt, Facing Tyranny, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on Hour 2 of BPR, live from the Boston Public Library. We'll check in with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner on today's rulings from the Supreme Court. But before we do, it's Live Music Friday. The Charles River Jazz Fest joins ahead of their 5th free festival. We'll talk with and hear performances from festival founder and saxophonist Seba Molnar, Lauren Ben, Jess Curran of the Boston Jazz Foundation.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then environmentalist Bill McKibben joins for a fact check on all things the Trump administration has said about the environment and climate change, and makes the case that the Environmental Protection Agency really needs a new name since it no longer serves to protect the environment. It's all ahead in the second hour of BPR on 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Louise Schiavone. The Supreme Court has issued an opinion in the highly anticipated case on birthright citizenship, which was ultimately about the use of universal injunctions. NPR's Juliana Kim reports.
The Supreme Court justices voted 6-3 in favor of the Trump administration's request to limit the use of universal injunctions issued by federal courts. The 3 liberal justices dissented. Universal injunctions were at the center of the case on birthright citizenship because federal courts had attempted to use it to block President Trump from ending automatic citizenship for all babies born in the U.S. The Trump administration later asked the Supreme Court to block universal injunctions altogether. Friday's opinion asked the lower courts to reconsider their broad rulings. It also said Trump's birthright citizenship order can't take effect for 30 days, giving more time for legal challenges. Juliana Kim, NPR News.
President Trump this morning is calling this opinion a giant win.
I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president.
In other opinions, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that Congress acted within its authority when it established a program that provides accessible and subsidized Internet service to rural and underserved areas. Justices Neil Gorsuch, Samuel Alito, and Clarence Thomas dissented. The justices also voted 6-3 to uphold the provision of the Affordable Care Act that provided free preventive care for millions of Americans. In another case, the conservatives on the Supreme Court said parents do have a First Amendment right to opt their children out of public school classes that use books with gay characters. China and the U.S. say they have signed a trade agreement which formalizes a temporary deal they'd already reached in May. There are few details on the agreement, but NPR's Emily Feng breaks down what we do know.
Trade negotiation teams met in Switzerland in May and agreed that both countries would pause most of the retaliatory tariffs they'd imposed on each other for 90 days. Tariffs that reached as high as a base of 145% tax the U.S. imposed on Chinese goods. But then that agreement seemed to fall apart quickly, only to be resuscitated after teams from the two countries met again in London earlier this month. This week, President Trump said he'd signed a trade deal without specifying what was in it. China clarified Friday that they confirmed what they called a consensus reached in May. And China also said they'd begin approving the export of some controlled items, notably some rare earth metals that only China currently refines. Emily Feng, NPR News, Washington.
Stocks are putting in a strong performance, with Wall Street so far on track to finish the week at an all-time high. The Dow is up 477 points. This is NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Fire officials in Hingham say the South Shore Sports Complex is a total loss this afternoon after a 4-alarm fire tore through the building. They say nobody was inside the complex when the fire started late last night. No injuries are reported. Deputy Chief David Levinson says fire crews struggled with low water pressure in fire hydrants as they put out the flames.
So we're calling for more water than the system can supply. We tried another one around the corner, but there was nothing left.
Officials say the fire most likely started in the kitchen area. They're still investigating what might have caused it. The building housed special events, including summer programs for South Shore families for 25 years. The family of Molly Bish is holding a vigil tomorrow to observe the 25th anniversary of her disappearance and murder. The 16-year-old went missing on June 27, 2000, after being dropped off for her lifeguard job at Commons Pond in Warren. She never checked in for work, and an extensive police search failed to find her. Her remains were found 3 years later in a wooded area in nearby Palmer, along with evidence that she'd been sexually assaulted. District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. says the investigation is ongoing, as is the search for a suspect, saying witnesses or those with knowledge of what happened are sometimes more willing to come forward with the passage of time. A mixed bag of showers and sunshine for your weekend. Sun and clouds today, highs in the 70s. Showers, thunderstorms overnight into tomorrow. Daytime highs in the 70s. And mostly sunny on Sunday. That's the jackpot day, highs in the 80s. Right now, 70 in Boston. For more original reporting, visit gbhnews.org.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Thank you. Live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be live on Monday, but then we are off for our July 4th break. We'll be back here back in Brighton anyway, on July 7th. The Attorney General will be with us here at the Boston Public Library from 11 to 12 on July 9th, taking our questions and yours. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. In a couple of minutes, we're going to talk with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner about today's Supreme Court decision, particularly the one about the federal courts and birthright citizenship and Donald Trump's reaction to this a couple of minutes ago that was rather incredible, but we'll talk about that. But before then, and boy, do we need this, it's another round of Live Music Friday. On July 12th, that's 2 weeks from Saturday, the Boston Jazz Foundation hosts its 5th annual Charles River Jazz Festival. Totally free festival with music, food, arts, craft vendors. It's all happening at the Herter Park Amphitheater in Soldiers Field Road. More info and to reserve a free ticket, again, a free ticket, you go to bostonjazzfoundation.org. We'll talk a lot about it in a minute, but for now, here's Seba Molnar and his band performing his original song, a piece called Freedom. Welcome to you all. And his band, Seba, is going to join us up here on the stage, introduce his fellow players in a minute. And he's going to be joined up on the platform, whatever this thing is, up here, with the Boston Jazz Foundation co-founder, Mariah Phillips. Mariah, thanks for joining us. And someone you just heard, Vice Chair Jess Curran. Hey, Jess, how are you? Congratulations, all three of you. That was spectacular. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, Seba, tell who else is in the band.
Oh, man. So we've got it's like a family affair here. We almost have 2 or 3 bands in one. But over here, we've got Debo Ray on vocals.
Hey, Debo.
Kyle Afuni, part of Kyle E. Jess, which is one of the other bands here. We got David Ling on keys, Tyson Jackson on drums, and Mike Gary on bass.
Okay.
What's the genesis of this thing? How did it happen? How did this thing happen? The foundation, the whole deal.
Yeah, so it all started with like a artist housing collective that I was part of in Alston, actually just a few blocks down from the festival, and we had about a dozen musicians and visual artists and chefs all living together. We had a maker space in the basement where we used to do house shows and pop-up dinners and different events, and it really just grew and grew until we couldn't fit it in the house anymore. So we moved it outdoors, and it turned into the Charles River Jazz Festival, and collected these people along the way.
And Mariah, you're the co-founder, so what are people going to see when they go?
They're going to see an all-star lineup this year. We're very excited we're turning 5, and we have plenty of food trucks. We have artists and local merchants that are going to be setting up in our vendor row. So we're supporting small businesses, we're supporting, the local economy, and most of all, we're supporting the music. So we're really excited.
And it's free?
It's entirely free, yes.
So is this a jazz-friendly city, Jazz? We ask a lot of jazz players that question, and I have to say it's mixed. They say there's a lot of potential. It's not what it should be. Where are you on this?
Well, I think we're actively trying to make it better. I think especially after the pandemic, we lost a lot of spaces to perform. Obviously, there's a lot of people in the city and surrounding that are so into it, and we find that we have a lot of a great audience to access. But I think now we're starting to see a little bit more building of spaces that artists can perform in a creative way.
The number of people coming to the festivals increased dramatically every one of the 4 years so far, right?
Yeah, we started at 500 and we had close to 3,000 last year.
So I just want to ask you, because I always thought my life could have been so different if I'd grown up in a commune.
This is pathetic.
Tell us about that. Excuse me.
Growing up?
No TV, no internet.
Yeah, so I had a very unconventional childhood off the grid. My mother is an organic vegetable farmer. My dad runs an alternative school. And I didn't have any TV. I didn't have internet. So it was basically just working on the farm and practicing my instrument.
Did you have a saxophone back when you were a little kid?
I did. So both of my parents are hobby musicians. So I had music around the house, and my dad had a clarinet and a saxophone, and I eventually picked it up, and here I am.
I created the balance. You had no TV, I had only TV. So that was a good balance. So Mariah, I don't want to shortchange the foundation. You do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
In addition to this festival, in schools and that. Tell us some of the other things that are sort of non-traditional
Absolutely.
kinds of things.
So we have our BJF in the Schools initiative. We launched that this spring, actually, in Sharon High School with a presentation on what it's like to be a musician and that balance of life, and that the road isn't always linear. And then we also gave them an opportunity to talk to some of the musicians that are on this stage right now and their journey as touring artists and things like that. We also have the Jazz Square initiative, Jazz Square Activation, which is awesome. A collaboration with the Reckonings Project and the Claremont Neighborhood Association. Mass Ave and Columbus Ave used to be home to about like 20 different jazz clubs back in the 40s and 50s, and now Wally's is the only one that's still standing.
I drove by it this morning with a beautiful little recognition there.
Yeah, the guy,
I know he did. That's a beautiful thing. So it's now called Jazz Square? Is that what
it is? It is now officially Jazz Square. We had our celebration this past fall, and we are continuing to activate the space and shine the light on the history, but also create a movement and excitement about the future.
And Jessica, I've been reading you've been on the stage with all sorts of famous musicians, but you're also a composer and an improviser. So tell us about that part of your work.
Yeah. So currently my project is with my husband, who's playing guitar over there.
Hi.
We both have our own project, and we came together kind of when we got married, I guess.
It's a good time to get it together, right?
Yeah, right? So we've been composing together, and actually at the festival we're going to be playing a set of our original music together. And jazz is such a great way for kind of everybody to approach music, even if it's a composition, with an air of improvisation and expression.
And the first song we just heard, "The Freedom," was written by you, Seba, right? But this next song we're going to hear is written by you, Jessica.
That's the thing you won the John Lennon thing. That's what you won the John Lennon songwriting thing.
Yes. So
Weightless, right? Is that what it's called? Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
It won the John Lennon songwriting competition for jazz in 2017, and now we're doing our own rendition of it today. Yeah.
Are you all Berkeley people?
Yeah.
Everybody?
Well, not me.
No, not you.
I am in most of the band, and then Jess is...
I teach in the ensemble department.
So it's Berkeley. I mean, and we've had Roger Brown, the former president, here a lot of times for a lot of different things he's doing. This is a huge incubator. I mean, it is such an important part of the jazz life of the city, no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Berkeley is the reason we're all here, and after going to Berkeley, pretty much every opportunity I've had is somehow connected to Berkeley. I think.
You mean the whole network that exists out there? Yeah,
there's people who went to Berkeley play everywhere. So if you go to any city in the country, you'll find people who went to Berkeley. So Berkeley is really crucial in bringing in talent to Boston, training them, creating a space. I think the thing that Boston really needs is to have the infrastructure after school. So once you graduate, we have a lot of musicians that'll move to New York or to LA and look for new things. So we constantly have this turnover, and it's really difficult to build a community, to build a scene when everybody's constantly leaving. So
Mariah, am I right? Was the city supportive in some serious ways of these efforts? Did I read that, or am I making that up?
Oh, the city of Boston.
Well, tell us about that, because we talk a lot about how unsupportive governments in this country are of the arts, particularly as compared to our Western European neighbors.
Yeah.
What did the city do here?
The city of Boston has provided us with numerous grants the last 3 years, and they provided us with the funding for the activation of Jazz Squares. So we got that with the Downtown Neighborhood Activation Grant, $50,000 to use over 3 years. And we are continuously funded by them for support of the festival. So they have been financially supportive. They have been just supportive in general, and people that we can reach out to, especially the Arts Council. Yeah.
What else? I mean, you talked here, but I also read some of the things you said, Seba, about the choice to go to New York or the generic New York or someplace that, and deciding to stay here. And you were all nodding in agreement on that. What else could governments do, cities and state, that would not break the bank, that would create a more fertile, supportive environment, whether it's housing stuff? What could they do?
Yeah, I think housing is huge. Just the cost of living in Boston as an artist and a creative person is insane to come up with that kind of money when you're playing $100 gigs here or there. So I think definitely bringing the cost of housing down is huge. And then also just there's a lot of red tape when it comes to putting on large events, outdoor events, having food trucks, having that. So I think finding ways to make it a little easier to create these events.
You're looking for volunteers for this thing, too,
Absolutely.
are you? How do people, if they want to volunteer, how do they get in touch with the operation?
If you go to our website, bostonjazzfoundation.org/Charles CRJF, we have a volunteer form there. And
what would they be doing?
Well, a little bit of everything.
Let's talk to the head of volunteerism over here. Jess.
Yeah, actually.
They're probably, so our community is DIY. We started this grassroots, so we're looking for a lot of people who are willing to set up tents and break down tents and, help us with the general upkeep and security of the festival, help with the vendors, help with the artists, things like that.
Great. Now, before you return to your bandmates in about 30 seconds, what was the first television show you ever saw?
The first Probably Tom and Jerry. I had a little cassette tape from my grandparents that they gave me, and I watched that on loop over and over and over.
And did you say, why did my parents keep me away from this for all these years, or no?
Every time I would go to visit my grandparents, it would be like 2 weeks of straight just sitting on the couch, trying to get it all in as fast as I could.
That's right. Okay. You guys go over there because you're going to get ready to play your song again.
Down,
and right, while they're going over, just tell people too, this is all outdoors, right? The amphitheater over there on Soldiers Field Road. So this is right along the river. So it's a gorgeous spot.
Absolutely. It's a gorgeous spot. The Herta Park Amphitheater is this hidden little gem that I feel like not a lot of people know of, but it's an island that's right next to the Charles River, and you have the kayaks right up the road. It's beautiful. We're rain or shine. We did have a festival that was entirely in the rain, and we still had like over 1,000 people show up.
Good.
So please come, no matter the weather. We will be there. We will be performing, and it's going to be absolutely wonderful.
BostonJazzFoundation.org, and now Seba and his band are back again playing Weightless. Welcome back.
And I'd just like to dedicate this to my mom. It's her birthday this weekend, and this is her favorite song. So. Will it make you run away? I can't escape the way I feel about you. Can I imagine that you'd stay? But there's no time for looking down. Hand in mine, no room for down.
to saxophonist Seba Molnar, Jess Curran, and Mariah Phillips from the Charles River Jazz Festival. It takes place Saturday, July 12th at the Herder Park Amphitheater on Soldiers Field Road. BostonJazzFoundation.org for free tickets, but you need to reserve them, right? BostonJazzFoundation.org for those tickets and more information. Thank you so much. That was
Great
awesome,
song.
you guys.
Great.
Coming
Happy
up
birthday to your
after this
mom.
quick break, a Supreme Court check-in with the retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. He's Jim Browdy. I'm Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Steve Aoki has been making electronic music for decades, dominating a genre whose popularity has ebbed and flowed. Well, now, when dance music is peaking again, Aoki is sticking to his roots.
I am one of the few people in the EDM space that care about dropping albums.
I'm Ari Shapiro. Steve Aoki's latest studio album on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum with Ming Fei, Edge of the Garden, a profound and playful exhibition filled with sculptures of oversized fruits and hybrid plants, opening June 26th. More at gardnermuseum.org. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, helping families overcome the college planning stress. Committed to providing trusted guidance with calculators, step-by-step videos, and more. Details at mefa.org.
If this goes over a minute, it goes over a minute, okay? Welcome back to BPR. Mark Regan and Jim Browdy live from the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Joining us now via phone from an undisclosed location is retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School, BPR contributor, and obviously she's going to talk to us about the decisions surrounding birthright citizenship to this morning by the Supreme Court. Judge Gertner, thanks for joining us.
It's good to be here from an undisclosed location.
That's right. That's right. So, Judge Gertner, President Trump is very happy about what the Supreme Court did. Explain to us what they did do.
Well, I don't think he should be happy, and I think that his various tweets are actually uncharacteristically false. So, for example, what the court did, it didn't address birthright citizenship at all. It was addressing a problem which actually people on both sides of the aisle had recognized with nationwide injunctions. Now, for sure, when there were nationwide injunctions against Biden, the court did not take up the issue. They only took up the issue in connection with probably the least appropriate case in the galaxy, which is the case challenging birthright citizenship. In other words, if there ever were a case for nationwide relief, it would be a case challenging the very foundational principle of what a citizen is. So I think what the court did was technical. Raise the question of whether an individual judge in an individual jurisdiction can issue an injunction that would affect not just the parties in front of them, but everyone in the country. What the court did essentially is leave the issue to filing a nationwide class action. What that means is that if you have an individual who's arguably challenged, their citizenship is being challenged, they can bring a class on behalf of others who are similarly situated in the country. A class action. That is a more cumbersome procedure than just going into court and saying, give me relief, and by the way, we want relief for the entire country. This is an additional step that a plaintiff has to take to say there's me, and then there are all the other people similarly situated, certify a class. There are more rules to follow. But that's what will happen here. And then the issue, so there will be nationwide classes now, I predict, in all of the cases that are pending. And the court will then, at a later date, have to deal with the question of birthright citizenship. So the bottom line is that they have made nationwide challenges more difficult, more procedurally cumbersome, but that's all.
Well,
so this is no intergalactic victory for the president.
Every time I am totally devastated by a Supreme Court decision and you pull me back, I feel good with a however. There's consensus that there was no decision on the merits of birthright citizenship, even though Trump at his press conference, and we were criticized by some listener for not taking it live. The reason we didn't take it live is because he makes up stuff like birthright citizenship was meant for babies of slaves, not meant for people trying to scam the country by coming into the country on a vacation. That's actually not what the Constitution says. However, here's the however thing that concerns me. Until that class action is filed, it seems to me, as the half-assed lawyer, as opposed to the real lawyer and Judge Yu, I may get the number of states wrong, but in the 22 states that were represented in the proceeding that this was about, his executive order from day one banning birthright citizenship has no effect. But if you're in the other 28 states that weren't part of this lawsuit, at least until a class action is filed, isn't his executive order operative?
It is operative, except the court stayed its decision for 30 days.
Okay.
Which is an interesting thing. She stayed the decision for 30 days. And I know for a fact that around the country in all the pending challenges to the challenge to birthright citizenship, people are now moving to amend their complaint to include a nationwide class. So I think that has happened. I think, we oftentimes talk about not just the actual impact of the decision, but what it implies. Mm-hmm. This is an extraordinary decision for this court, of many extraordinary decisions. Of all the cases in which to bring up this procedural issue, this is the most ridiculous. And there were challenges, as I said, to nationwide injunctions under Biden, but the court never took up the issue. They simply allowed nationwide injunctions against Biden initiatives. But now they're suddenly bending over backwards to think about nationwide injunctions with respect to Trump orders.
Why'd you say a minute ago, Judge Gertner, why'd you say a couple of times this would be should be the last case where they would take up the issue of nationwide injunctions? Why are you saying that?
Well, what I'm saying is that they're saying that the nationwide injunctions in an individual case with an individual judge are not appropriate because you're giving relief beyond the parties in the case in front of you. Mm-hmm. Now, that's true, and there have certainly been abuses. Notably, the Texas judge who regularly declared abortion-related...
Yes, that's what I was... Mifepristone guy, Kaczmarek, or whatever his name is.
Judge Kaczmarek, that's right. And no one... and criticisms were raised with respect to that, but the court never took up those criticisms at all. They're taking it up in connection with the case that it makes the least sense. And it makes the least sense because one cannot be a citizen in New Jersey and not in New York. This is not what a nation is about, and it's not what the Constitution said. So this is the least appropriate. However, there is a workaround, to put it bluntly, to this decision. And the workaround will make it somewhat harder. But individuals, let's say in the case in Massachusetts, will make it a nationwide class action, saying I'm the same, not just as everyone in Massachusetts with respect to this policy, but I'm the same as everyone in the country. And the odds are judges will grant nationwide class status in those situations. And so they've created a procedural impediment, more hoops to run through,
Understood.
But they're not going to stop these nationwide challenges under these circumstances. Then the court's going to kick the can down the road now about birthright citizenship. And I continue to predict that although I have been wrong with this court, but there is simply no way in hell that the court would throw out birthright citizenship. It's explicit in the Constitution. It's explicit in the case law. You basically have to apply the law of Mars if you're going to throw this out.
They'll never give the president immunity from criminal prosecution either, will they, Judge Gertner?
Well, speaking of another...
no, it's true.
Speaking of another case that really upset me, and I know we're always asking you to read the tea leaves up there at the Supreme Court, but the one stunned me was earlier, several days ago, when they decided, the Supreme Court did, that it was okay to send people, when they deported them from the United States, send them to countries where it was likely they might be tortured, like South Sudan. They said that was okay. And I read that and I thought, all hope is lost is what I thought, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, no, I mean, in my job as therapist in chief for the two of you,
thank you.
I mean, that is actually an incomprehensible decision. That is an incomprehensible decision. The only salve for that decision is that it is a decision on a preliminary injunction, and not, in other words, temporarily. They are allowing that to go forward. Now, usually a temporary order predicts what the outcome is going to be, but that order doesn't make sense in the light of the other temporary orders that they've made. So I hope to chalk that off to just, a back of the envelope decision. In other words, they had already said in the 1 a.m. order in the Alien Enemies Act that you can't throw someone out of the country without at least some due process.
Yeah.
Right. But if you get the due process and then you wind up in El Salvador, they can then move you around the globe to any hellhole they want without any process. That just makes no sense whatsoever.
One last thing.
I mean, I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
No, I'm saying so. This is temporary. I think when the final decision is made, I can't imagine that this would stand, but I have been surprised.
By the way, you're exactly $300 cheaper than my shrink, and I thank you. One last thing. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, when she spoke after Trump this morning at the press conference, acknowledged that they didn't rule on the merits. She said this is all pending litigation. It's going to be decided, meaning birthright citizenship itself, in October by the Supreme Court, and we'll discuss that after the litigation. And NPR's response was, it's not clear the Supreme Court will, in fact, rule in October. They expect some sort of court orders on Monday. But my final question is, how difficult is it to put together a class for a class action in response to these endless streams of executive orders from the president? How big a deal is that?
Well, I don't think it is a big deal. It's more complicated than just having a single plaintiff saying, I represent the class, and there should be, I represent the nation, and therefore there should be a preliminary, a nationwide injunction. You do have to show that that the class has been subjected to an executive order and are seeking relief, all with respect to that executive order. Technically, it's called a B2 class for your lawyers. In other words, where the class is defined by the action of the government. So I think it's not difficult to do at all in cases involving birthright citizenship because we are all in that bucket. It shouldn't be difficult. It does present some... it will slow things down to a degree. There has to be a motion for class certification. Mm-hmm. The judge has to hold a hearing. It will slow things down, but it can be done. They also didn't close the door to another technical issue, which is a challenge under the Administrative Procedure Act to agency regulations could be nationwide because, after all, federal regulations don't just apply in Iowa and not in New York. So there are ways around this, but they've done two things here. One, present procedural hurdles, which we can get around, but nevertheless are there. And then there's the symbolism of why this case, of all the cases.
Well, we know why this case, don't we? Because they're in the tank to the President of the United States. Isn't that fairly obvious?
Your words, not mine.
Okay, that's my words. Hey, Judge Gertner, as always, we really, really appreciate your time, and you'll be back on Monday
for our next therapy session.
And for the whole spectrum of cases they decided. Judge Gertner, thanks. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Judge Gertner.
Thanks.
Judge Nancy Gertner is a retired federal judge, senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and the Boston Public Radio contributor, and our therapist, Jim. After a quick break, climate activist and environmentalist Bill McKibben joins us. Can't wait to talk to him. Oh my goodness, talk about needing more therapy. He's Jim Browdy's Marjorie Egan. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy. Listening to Boston Public Radio on 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, thousands of troops are still on the ground in Los Angeles after the city's massive anti-deportation protests. President Trump wants to build Alligator Alcatraz, and the Milford team detained by ICE pushes back on claims he's lying. It's our Latinx News Roundtable. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Subaru of New England. The all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Crosstrek is committed to keeping your loved ones safe on adventures this summer. Subaru retailer locations at subaruofnewengland.com. And Bunker Hill Community College, offering 6-week summer mini-sessions to achieve college and skills goals. Sessions start June 1st and July 14th. Registration at bhcc.edu/summer.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browder. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're live on Monday, then we're off for the rest of the July 4th week. We're back the 7th, and on the 9th, which is Wednesday, the Attorney General joins us for an hour of Ask the AG. Joined now on Zoom by environmentalist Bill McKibben. He's an author, educator, co-founder of 350.org, founder of thirdact.org. He has a newsletter on Substack, which is spectacular, called The Crucial Years, writes regularly for The New Yorker, and obviously not wearing his baseball cap because the Red Sox have lost 5 straight games. Good to see you. That's the truth. He won't admit it. Good to see you, Bill McKibben.
Yeah.
Very good to see you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's not fair to you, Bill McKibben. They shouldn't be losing any games, given what you're a big fan of what you have to put up with on the climate front. But anyway, we just came through this really big heat wave, hottest day we've ever had in Boston. And what does it mean for us with these really early and really hot summer-like weather, and the summer-like weather extending into September and even October sometimes last few
Marjorie,
years?
it means exactly what you think it means. Can I just, before we get to it, can I say one thing?
Sure.
And you've probably already covered this today, but I just wanted to take a moment and just kind of mark the passing of Bill Moyers.
Oh, yes.
We have not.
Yes,
we have not. Please do.
You know, a great friend of mine, and one of the people who helped launch both 350.org and Third Act.
Oh, I didn't know that.
His role as chair of the Schumann Foundation, the philanthropy that gave them early financial support. But you know, the great public broadcaster maybe of all time. And just for me, the more I've thought about it over the last 24 hours, the exemplar of the kind of post-war rational liberal order that's now sort of crumbling around us. The thought that the job that he once did for LBJ is now being done by Carolyn Levitt is one of the truly sad, declensions in American history. But back to the weather.
Hold on for 1 second.
I have something to say too.
If I don't know if you're on TikTok, but if you don't like Carolyn Levitt, there's endless. I don't know the woman's name that imitates Carolyn Levitt with the different huge crosses around her, or a different cross. Sometimes they're made out of masks from COVID masks. Today they were made out of soldiers. These huge cross hanging off her neck all the time.
But I have a better, well, not a better, but have you read Doris's book about her love affair with her husband, An Unfinished Love Story?
Yeah, and there's a wonderful section about Bill in there.
Yeah.
Well, but the best part about Bill in there, which is maybe not as serious on the policy side, is my favorite story that Doris told us a few months ago when the book came out, is both Bill Moyers and her husband, Richard Goodwin, needed a meeting with LBJ, and LBJ's people said he's in the pool in the White House. You have to meet him. So they get down to the pool. LBJ is naked in the pool, And he says, if you want to talk to me, Bill Moyers and Richard Goodwin, you got to get naked too. So the three of them are in the White House pool, totally naked, discussing critical policy for this country. In any case, okay, back to what are the consequences of early summer and late summer, Bill McKibben?
So look, it wasn't just Boston and the East Coast. We're in a very, very, very hot stretch, and we have been since the middle of 2023. And we got some more data this last couple of weeks on kind of exactly what's going on. One of the things that's happening, that's causing an dramatic increase in these extreme weather events, is that because we've melted so much of the ice in the Arctic, there's now much less of a temperature differential between the equator and the poles. And so the jet stream tends to get stuck. And if you're on one side of it, you get baked and have drought. And if you're on the other side of it, you get nonstop rain, which we had, at least up here in Vermont, for much of the spring. The consequences of these are immediate, in that it gets really miserable and people die and whatever from these heat waves. We'll know in a few weeks exactly what the excess mortality was from this event, but it will be there because this was as hot as it's ever been in this part of the world. But the longer term effect of all of these, and there's a great and chilling piece in the Financial Times yesterday, it is also that we're beginning to see the kind of economic meltdown that comes with these events. The estimate is that last year the U.S. spent $1 trillion on climate-related damage. Some of that was fixing up after hurricanes, and some of it was the increase in insurance premiums that everybody is now paying. And this story in the Financial Times lays out a perfectly plausible scenario for how that could move us quite quickly into a kind of permanent 2008 financial crisis. You can't get insurance already in parts of this country, and it seems to be spreading quickly. Jerome Powell, the chair of the Fed, said within 10 or 15 years, there'll be broad swaths of the country where you can't get insurance. If you can't get insurance, you can't get a mortgage. That's what the banking system is largely built on. Our biggest asset class starts depreciating in value steadily. All of this just to say, it highlights the perverse folly of what this administration is doing, wasting the last few years that we really have to try and do something about this crisis in its, just fealty to the fossil fuel industry.
You always leave us, and I don't wait till the end with at least a little bit of good news. And I want to bring up something that I consider to be good news. You wrote a wonderful piece about, and I'll paraphrase your piece, about how not only should climate change be the biggest science story, it should be the biggest everything story because it trickles out into agriculture, meteorology, the economy especially. Marjorie says the same thing almost every day. You read these stories, and even ones that are 100% connected to climate change, you don't read it. I'm assuming you've heard about this unit now at CBS News. At the same time that they're trying to kowtow at the top to Donald Trump, CBS News reporters on climate change are doing exactly what you're saying, is trying to get into it through the back door, and they're doing a ton of pieces, which is fabulous, don't you think?
Yeah, it's fabulous, and it illustrates the point that this is not an impossible thing to talk about. The common wisdom at TV guys for years has been no one wants to hear about this, blah blah blah. In fact, people are absolutely fascinated by the weather. There's large numbers of people who sit and watch the Weather Channel for hours upon end.
I love the Weather Channel.
I think it's possible that your ratings may go down when I come on.
Not nearly true.
I think that, in fact, there's a tremendous audience for this because people intuitively understand the danger that we're in, and they understand the connections to their own lives. Everybody, we all spend a lot of time worrying about the stock market or, whatever, but it's not like even a bad day on the stock market is not like a 103-degree day in Boston. You couldn't not feel it when it was going on,
No, and every day is another front page story in the Globe today about Lake Winnipesaukee, huge lake up in New Hampshire, and how the cyanobacteria is so bad there, and people's property values. I don't think you necessarily want to buy a house on a polluted lake you can't swim in, or maybe even let your dog go near. But I wanted to ask you about that, the Trump administration and what he calls his big, beautiful bill. This is going to do, you feel like we're not going to be time left after, if he succeeds at wiping out all these climate protections that he wants to.
Yes. Look, it's the big, beautiful bill, which, I've been trying to persuade my wife to call me, but...
But I'm bummed. Hasn't used that line before. Go ahead, Bill McKibben. Go
ahead. The big, beautiful bill has all kinds of categories of bad in it. One of them is removal of protections just from the landscape itself.
Yeah.
Same thing where we're going to start selling off Western land to billionaires to build their next, vacation home. It removes all kinds of straightforward environmental protections, and it removes the money that we were going to be using to try and have an energy transition. Meanwhile, really what it should be called, at least these sections of it, are the China Empowerment Act. Because while we're doing this, the Chinese are doing exactly the opposite. Here's some numbers for you. In May, the Chinese put up 90 gigawatts of solar panels, a new record for them, even for them by a large margin. A gigawatt is the rough equivalent of a nuclear power plant. So the Chinese put up the equivalent of a nuclear power plant every 8 hours in May. With solar panels. That's what the rest of the world is doing while we're futzing around, trying to help Chevron and Exxon.
Bill, big, beautiful Bill McKibben, is most of what we talked to you about in the Inflation Reduction Act, that was the largest investment in preventing climate change in American history. I don't know if it's in world history, but surely our country's history under Joe Biden. Is all of that being undone in this reconciliation measure?
No, some of it. You'll remember that they had to stick in a bunch of bad parts into the IRA in order to get Joe Manchin to sign on.
Sure.
Stuff for, wasting a lot of money on these carbon capture schemes, doing a lot of ethanol kind of stuff, that kind of stuff. Guess what? All that stuff's going to stay in.
Oh, God.
So we're going to do all the completely wasteful, stupid things that were in there only to win Joe Manchin's vote in the first place. Most of that will remain. And all we're taking out is the part about clean energy. So on every front, we're just making the poorest possible set of decisions for the most obvious reasons. It's not like they're attempting very hard to hide any of this or to pretend that they're not doing what they're doing.
And the reasons are fossil fuel money support from those companies.
Absolutely.
But the thing that I thought was so smart that is totally not worked is I naively assumed that NPR and PBS would not be in trouble because in so many rural red states, PBS and NPR are the only things that their constituents get. And even if they hate what they hear, their constituents need what they hear. I was wrong so far about that. Also, isn't a majority of the infrastructure that comes from the Inflation Reduction Act on climate change in the same red states whose senators and reps are going to vote to repeal it?
Yep, absolutely. And you're right. There's a extremely perverse quality to this. But that seems to be a feature of this administration in almost every way. Look, I spent my whole life in rural America. Rural America, which voted overwhelmingly for Trump, is going to be destroyed by this bill. There's not going to be a rural hospital left in America 10 years from now if this thing passes. So the the triumph of pure ideology and vested interest and incredibly short-term thinking is that's what this bill is.
Well, you wrote it was titled "Darn It, That's Just Not True" in your Substack piece about the Trump administration lying, and you focused on two things: wildfires and coal plants. So tell us about those things, 'cause I think it's important for everyone to know that they're not telling the truth here about anything.
About thing after thing after thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's endless examples, but they're constantly insisting, that wildfires aren't on the increase or that they're not caused by climate change or whatever else, when the science on this couldn't be clearer. I mean, there's a reason that the boreal forest of Canada has caught on fire the last 3 years and hadn't caught on fire for the century before that. It's too hot and too dry.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill McKibben, for those watching on streaming, you are wearing a beautiful T-shirt, and I am on a beautiful website, sunday.earth. What is Sunday?
Sunday's what we're building for now. September 21st, the autumnal equinox. It's going to be a big day of celebration of clean energy across the country. Think solar-powered concerts. Think people opening their homes for tours of their heat pumps and solar panels. Think perhaps the guerrilla installation of some solar panels on interesting buildings across America.
Oh.
The point of the whole thing is we need to get across to people that this stuff is no longer alternative energy. That we've called it that for decades, but it's now the cheapest. We live on a planet, as I have said to you before, where the cheapest way to make power is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. If we can get that through the collective noggin of the United States, then we have a chance of not being utterly left behind by China and everybody else in the decades ahead.
Before you go, we only have 45 seconds. The likely Democratic candidate for mayor of New York City has said his favorite mayor is the mayor of Boston. You said the best environmental mayor in America is the mayor of Boston. How is Mamdani on things you care about, Bill McKibben?
I think he's actually going to be great. He didn't talk about climate a whole lot, but the things that he's doing all work in the right direction. So, for instance, a real emphasis on mass transit is precisely what one would hope for in New York. Most of all, it's just good to see someone, give a little kick in the nuts to the establishment of all kinds. We need some. It's pretty nice to have some energy for once in the Democratic Party. I stayed up all night watching that come in, and it made me pleased as punch.
Yeah.
Sunday, go to sunday.earth, September 21st. We'll talk about it with Bill again before it happens. We'll make your plans. Bill McKibben, it's great to see you. Be well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Take care, y'all.
And we hope for your sake the Red Sox pick it up. Pick it up. Thank you very much for being with us. We've been speaking with Bill McKibben, environmentalist Bill McKibben, author, educator, co-founder of 350.org, founder of thirdact.org. That's where you can give money if you're over a certain age to help out for the environment. He has a newsletter on Substack titled The Crucial Years. And Sunday, as Jim said, is the 21st. Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, Sue O'Connell joins us. She's going to talk about the Karen Reed trial. She's going to talk about the Jeff Bezos wedding. Who's on the list to the Jeff Bezos wedding over there in romantic Venice. She's next. You're listening to Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be right back after the news.
GBH is more than just a news station. We are your local public radio station. We understand the importance of a local lens. And if that community angle is important to you, let us know. Donate at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you and Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Mass General Brigham. Their leading heart and vascular specialists are committed to providing breakthrough care to patients with cutting-edge research and innovative treatments. Learn more at massgeneralbrigham.org/heart.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of BPR. Media maven Sue O'Connell is back, finally. She'll reflect on her post as primary jury watcher for the second Karen Reed trial. Plus, Trump's week of F-bombs, Bezos getting married in Venice, and Zohran Mamdani calling Mayor Wu the most effective Democrat in America.
I'm Marjorie Egan, then we'll end the show with you. As so many get ready to hit the roads for the July 4th week, Boston drivers have been ranked the worst in the country 10 years running. What do you make of the standing? At least we're good at something. Well, we'll open the lines to get your thoughts on Greater Boston's terrible driving culture, from Cybertrucks galore to scooters in the bike lane to wasting your life away in Cape Bridge traffic. It's all next in the third hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Louise Schiavone. The Supreme Court ruled today that lower courts had gone too far in efforts to block executive orders from President Trump, with federal agency bans related to birthright citizenship being a case in point. The 6-3 opinion gave the Trump administration more room to press its case on children born in the U.S. without at least one parent who's an American citizen or lawful permanent resident. President Trump today welcomed the decision.
Instead of merely ruling on the immediate cases before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation. In practice, this meant that if any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect or at least delay it for many years.
The justices did not rule per se on the constitutional merits of birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court today upheld the part of the Affordable Care Act that made preventive care like cancer screenings free for patients. NPR's Selena Simmons-Duffin has details.
The U.S. Preventive Services Task Force is made up of volunteer experts. If they determine that a cancer screening or preventive medication is based on good evidence, the Affordable Care Act requires health insurers to cover it without any cost to patients. Braidwood Management, a company owned by Christian conservatives in Texas, challenged the constitutionality of the task force. It objected to covering HIV prevention medications. But the justices upheld the status quo in a 6-3 decision. The majority opinion, written by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, noted that the health secretary, currently Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has the power to review the recommendations. Selena Simmons-Duffin, NPR News, Washington.
2 weeks after they were killed in an apparent political assassination, State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark will lie in state in Minnesota. Minnesota Public Radio's Dana Ferguson reports.
State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark will lie in state Friday in the Capitol Rotunda, and members of the public can pay their respects. Hortman will be the first woman to lie in state there. Just 19 other state officials have been given the honor. The Hortman's golden retriever Gilbert, who was also killed in the attack, will be with them in the rotunda. Private funeral services for the Hortmans will be held tomorrow and video streamed for the public to watch. The alleged shooter who killed the Hortmans and injured another state lawmaker and his wife is in jail and faces murder charges. For NPR News, I'm Dana Ferguson in St. Paul.
The S&P 500 opened the day with a 0.5% increase, poised at this point in the day to stage a sharp turnaround from just 3 months ago when Trump tariff policies led shares lower. At this hour, the S&P up 39 points. This is NPR News in Washington.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell is slamming today's Supreme Court decision on President Trump's executive order aimed at ending birthright citizenship. Campbell and other Democratic attorneys general sued to block the order, winning nationwide injunctions from lower courts. In a news conference with those AGs today, Campbell emphasized that the ruling only touches on the power of lower courts to issue injunctions that apply to the entire country. And she says while the Supreme Court's decision won't impact Massachusetts, it could create chaos in other states until there's a ruling on birthright citizenship itself.
People move, they live along state borders, they're born in hospitals outside the state they live in. A baby's citizenship should not, cannot, and must not be determined by the borders of the state they find themselves in at the time of birth.
Campbell says she and other Democratic attorneys general will keep fighting on the issue. Families on the South Shore are mourning the loss of a sports complex in Hingham that was destroyed by fire overnight. The complex housed sports, camps, birthdays for 25 years. Sean Cummings says his children benefited greatly from sports programs in the building.
They're not just trying to make you an excellent soccer player or if you're playing another sport there. They want you to be a great person. They want you to be a community leader. That's what they really focus on. They have sessions outside of sports to just focus on the education aspect of soccer and life.
Officials say they don't believe anybody was inside the building when the fire started late last night. No injuries are reported. The mild weather continues this weekend with a chance of some wet weather. Sun and clouds today, highs in the 70s. Showers, thunderstorms possible overnight. Right now, 70 and sunny in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Auto Insurance protects the vehicles that work to keep small businesses moving forward, including protection while running errands and other tasks. At progressivecommercial.com.
He is Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Yegan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We will be live on Monday, but then we're off for our July 4th break. We're all very excited about it. Even Jim, not entirely sure why we didn't get the whole week off, but we're working on Monday, and then we're not working for the rest of the week. I don't know. Okay, one more programming note where the Attorney General is going to be with us at the Boston Public Library from 11 to noon on July 9th. Hello again, Jim, who made us all work on Monday.
I'm thinking of ordering you all to show up on Tuesday, too. I'm not sure yet, but I'll decide later tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, we're joined now by someone recently freed from the clutches of the second Karen Reed trial, our favorite local woman, media maven Sue O'Connell. She is co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News, commentator and news influencer. Again, I have no idea what that is, at NBC Boston, but you can find her on the socials at Sue NBC Boston, so I assume you'll find out what that is. Welcome back to the real world, Sue O'Connell. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The socials.
You wanted to start, Jen?
Oh, I do want to start.
Yes.
2 days ago, we celebrated
we did.
the 10th anniversary of Obergefell.
Yep. Yes.
Now, you and I
What a couple.
had
That's
a
what I
pretty
always
special
say.
moment about a decade earlier.
Yes, we did.
Where was that
we
moment?
were on Mass Ave in Cambridge, in front of City Hall, as the first same-sex marriages in the United States were being issued
Pretty
in
cool.
Cambridge. And I hadn't really prepared for what a big deal it was. I was broadcasting live for WFNX for 1 in 10. And I was so excited that when I saw Jim outside, I just jumped up and hugged him.
She did. She did.
We don't usually hug, even though we've known each other for 30
I called
years.
the local
We don't usually
authorities.
hug.
By the way, was that one of the most joyous nights you've ever experienced in your whole life?
It was amazing. The City Hall folks, Mayor Sullivan, that's who it was?
I'm not sure who was Mayor.
It was just, they kind of scooped Mayor Menino, who was unhappy that the Boston licenses weren't issued first.
I remember
I
that.
love the rivalry between Cambridge and Boston. No, it was really a great magical night. I'm still single, by the way, never married. Just
Yeah,
put that
we're looking out for you,
I'm
Sue.
fighting for your rights, not for mine.
One related question. We mentioned this. We were talking to Congresswoman
Mm-hmm.
Presley yesterday, I think. And also, it's the 3rd anniversary of the repeal of Roe v. Wade this week. And in that decision, as I know you know, Clarence Thomas, who supports nothing the American people support, went out of his way to say the same reasoning that we applied to repeal the right to an abortion in this country should be applied to relook at a bunch of decisions, including same-sex marriage. Is there fear that could be next?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to look no further than the Roe reversal, something that we felt was, law and was established and was not going to be challenged. And we look at the rulings that came out today, the Supreme Court, allowing parents to take a religious exclusion if their kids have a book that has an LGBTQ character in it, even if it's like a first grade book that there just happen to be 2 dads or 2 moms in it, totally appropriate for the age and not in any way threatening. So gay people are still the enemy to many people in the United States, and just because we have the right to marry right now doesn't mean that we always will. And I also think, this is out of my lane a little bit, but looking at the other ruling, diminishing the ability of our federal society, where federal judges can make rulings that impact the whole country as we're supposed to be set up, I don't think it's out of the ordinary or out of the norm to think we could go back to having a state-by-state patchwork on certain rights, and the same-sex marriage rights might be one of those.
Hope you're wrong. We're talking to Sue O'Connell.
Me too.
Okay, Susan O'Connell. Let's get back to
Who's Susan O'Connell?
Susan
Yes,
O'Connell.
Mom.
I don't know. I made
Yes, Mom.
Okay, I
My
made a
trouble
mistake
again?
there. You covered the Karen Reed trial almost from beginning to end. Anything you want to talk about, just what the jurors had to say post-verdict, or what the civil trial could look like, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the takeaway here is the same takeaway from the first trial, even though I think Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan did the best job he possibly could with his approach to the evidence that they had, and the defense made a much more streamlined approach, cutting out a lot of the threads that they had presented for reasonable doubt. In the end, it came down to just an old-fashioned reasonable doubt trial rather than a conspiracy. But the reality remains, and the jurors who I have spoken to and have spoken for their other jurors say that the police investigation in the first days and weeks of this trial pretty much put any doubt that they had about anything on an amplified level. So where the pieces of the taillight were, I don't know. They don't know, because the police didn't secure the scene. So again, the same problem with the first trial for the Commonwealth. The police investigation, the Canton Police, the Mass State Police, did not do the most basic work, which the Canton independent audit found of the police is no conspiracy, just not good work, and it has totally derailed. If people think Karen Reed did it, they're never going to find her guilty. They never did, because the investigation was so flawed from the beginning. And I think all of us should go back to our towns and our cities and look at our budgets and wonder how our police are being trained to answer a basic hit and run accident or a possible assault that might happen in your town, because every single one of us could end up being like John O'Keefe or like Karen Reed, depending on what side you look at, if the police cannot do the basic investigation.
The thing that really struck me as really outrageous was the state police, because a lot of small town police or medium town police don't handle that many murders. The state cops do all the time. So will we get some sort of mea culpa explanation from?
Well, they fired the lead investigator, Proctor.
They did, but that's not the whole ball of wax.
Well, the state police union wrong. You know, they issued a statement after the trial. Again, it's up to us. You know, I've been having this fight on X and Twitter. People keep saying, why isn't the mainstream media covering this? We do cover this. It's up to the voters. It's up to the citizens.
Cover the cops?
Yeah.
They're not reading the papers.
It's all we do, right? But we don't have the power to demand that Maura Healey do something about the state police, or demand that your mayor or your select board actually train your police to put a cruiser in front of what is going to be a death investigation instead of just leaving it open for 8 hours. So it's up to us.
Is this Karen Reed?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I did want to play this clip from a member of the John O'Keefe family, Vanessa Rizzitano. She told Boston 25 in a sit-down interview this week their experience as the family of John O'Keefe. Here it is.
That made me sick to my stomach. While it's other people's celebration, it literally was like the worst day of our lives. Hearing those words come out of her mouth literally was sickening. No. The prosecution, his family, his loved ones, including myself, we're the ones that fought the hardest for Johnny.
By the way, what she was referencing with the comments after the acquittal by Karen Reed saying nobody fought harder for justice for John O'Keefe than we did.
And as you had mentioned before, for some inexplicable reason, some of the crowds outside the courthouse were yelling things, including "cop killer," at the O'Keefe family. What was up with that?
Well, the amplification of the pitchfork crowd social media has really made that terrible. And
I agree with you, totally.
I don't know that the behavior is any better or worse. And now it's just everywhere, and it activates people to show up and do this. And some of the people in that crowd believe that the O'Keefe family was not helping in the investigation to find out what really happened to John. And in the first trial, they had some of the witnesses sit with them that some people might have perceived as being somewhat challenging to the jurors. But again, the O'Keefe family, I don't remember seeing any victim's family ever treated as terribly as the O'Keefe family has been.
And his mother's lost two children.
It's horrible. And again, it's the pitchfork crowd being amped up with gas and, matches thrown on them without understanding that these are real people who have had real loss. And it could happen to them just as easily as it happened to anyone else.
I have a couple of very quick things, so I want to move on. I think we were defending the media before it, which it deserves. I think, not you, I watch you a lot. Much of the media was so focused on Karen Reed that short shrift was given to the guy who lost his life, regardless of who's responsible. Three very quick things. Even though a jury has decided Karen Reed was not responsible for the death of John O'Keefe, they ask us on text, so are they going to go try to find, quote, the real killer?
No.
The answer is no.
No, because it's also a closed case for the Massachusetts State Police because they arrested and tried who they thought did it, so it's unlikely that there'll be an investigation into it.
Secondly, Rachel Rollins, the former district attorney of Suffolk County, former U.S. attorney, had to resign, who's been criticized by Aidan Kearney, Turtle Boy, who's deeply involved in this case, who has his own criminal cases pending, says without Turtle Boy's reporting, there would never, I'm paraphrasing, never have been justice in this case. What do you think of her comments?
So I think it's true that Aidan Kearney is the main factor in this case that drove forward the coverage of it and also revealed the problems with the investigation and the other things. The reality is if you're not worried about getting charged with witness intimidation, if you're not worried about possibly defaming someone, and if you're not worried about...
But she wasn't, is your point.
Accusing innocent people of doing something, then all of us could act like Aidan Kearney, but I don't think we all want to act like Aidan Kearney. Rachel Rollins has a previous relationship with Aidan, Turtle Boy, in that during Rayla Campbell, when she was running for... Congress, I think, against Ayanna Pressley, Monica Cannon Grant, who had headed BLM, Black Lives Matter here, who's now awaiting her own trial, called Rayla some terrible names. And allegedly, Rachel Rollins leaked that information to Turtle Boy, who then put this information. So there's this back channel leaking, like Turtle Boy is used as a weapon sometimes to forward an idea. So
third and final
very
thing.
Interesting backstory there.
To add to the list of totally incorrect predictions that I've made, almost every prediction I've ever made has been incorrect. I assumed that Karen Reed would be on Oprah or some such thing about a minute and a half after the verdict. We've heard essentially, other than Fox 25 showing video of her taking out the garbage at her condo, wherever it is, why haven't we heard from her lawyer, what's that about?
My guess, it's a guess, is that there's a payday coming up. They
put something together.
There were film crews following her. And
during the whole trial?
Most of the trial that I saw, not a huge thing.
Of her, on her side?
Yes. I believe that there's an exclusivity deal that you will hear from her and others. And again, she's got a lot of bills to pay, and there is a civil suit coming up that she's going to have to against her by the O'Keefe family. So.
Okay, now you can talk about what Marjorie really wants to talk about.
Well,
the Royals?
No,
not the Royals.
Not yet, but who knows? They may be able to buy themselves a crown or two. The Bezos wedding is in Venice this weekend, and some people there, I love the name of this group. This is the anti-billionaire group called Everyone Hates Elon.
I love that. That's in Western Europe, right?
They don't. Yeah, they're British, I think. They're protesting the wedding. Greenpeace is protesting the wedding. They've got like 90 private jets flying in and out of there. But what's your thoughts on the Bezos nuptials with Sanchez, his longtime girlfriend?
So Bezos pretty much launched Amazon just about the time I started at Bay Windows. So I'm a little depressed.
Yeah.
Because I'm here, and he's having single.
Yeah.
He's having this.
That's right.
In the smelliest place in the world. No offense, Venice.
Is it smelly?
Oh, it smells.
Oh yeah.
Really? Yeah.
I've never been there.
Yeah. So I don't know if I could ever do what they're doing ever, no matter how much money I had.
Yeah.
I can't even relate. I would like to be invited.
Hold on.
I'd like to go.
Why do they pick a smelly place to get married?
It's actually beautiful at the same time.
Well, it's hot. The summertime, you're
They
going to
have
have
nose
bad
plugs at
smell.
the wedding.
I'm not worried about them,
Now, they
Marjorie.
have millions of orchids everywhere, but
Yeah.
that's not going to take away the smell. And I didn't know George Clooney got married there, too.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. People
Yeah.
love it. I'm just saying. It's. I
But
didn't
it
go
smells?
because it smells. They invited me, and I didn't want to go because.
Was it sewage?
Well, the water is Venice is. I don't know
canals.
if you know
You know
this,
the canal
Marjorie.
I know the canals, but
Europe, underneath Europe, is not clean.
no, but it seems if you had more money than God, wouldn't you pick a non-smelly place to go get
Can
married?
I get into this conversation? I don't want you to
That's what I
take
would
this the
think.
wrong way,
Yeah.
Marjorie.
Yes.
Why do we care that much about this guy and his head transplanted wife to be? I mean, I really.
Jim always misses the big stories.
Well, what am I missing?
He's like, why do we care about Karen Reed? This
No,
is
I
like,
did not. I never said that.
He's above all these, weddings and murders and gossip.
I love the
Canter Bridges.
extravaganza.
The
extravaganza of it. I
guest
enjoy.
list. Tom Brady's going. Oprah's going, of course. Orlando
Exactly
Bloom is
my
going,
point.
newly single. Leonardo DiCaprio, he's always single.
Well,
Queen Rania
Whoever
of
that
Jordan.
is.
Yeah, Mick Jagger.
No one's answering my question.
You get to be
Why
the
do
head
we
of
care? Some people care, some people don't. I mean,
Okay.
you
Here's
want
a
to
question.
see. It's going to be tacky, which I think is their wedding invite looked like it was clip art, considering all the money that
Yeah.
they have. So I think the tackiness aspect
Okay.
of it is
Why
appealing
does
to
Mick
me.
Jagger want to go to this wedding?
Why
Jim?
wouldn't he want to go?
Well, because Jim says this is beneath him.
Did you say it was beneath?
No
Mick
interest
Jagger?
whatsoever. Ivanka Trump is going with her husband, and they brought their 3 children
Listen,
along as
this
well.
is a big flex. Okay, these weddings, this is showing how much money you can spend.
50 million.
Yeah, just
50
to
million.
have and weddings. Let's be real. Whether it's 50 million
Yeah.
or 50,000 or 5,000,
Mm-hmm.
when you throw a wedding, you are flexing to show your friends and family and community how much money you can spend on their open bar for whatever you want to do. So another wealthy man in the world, then his
Okay, before we
wife
leave
flexing.
this, Pickleball Maggie, who has been in the studio here from Concord, text, did you see the title at the end of Andy Borowitz's piece for today? Andy Borowitz, our famous satirist.
What did he say?
It ended with disastrous strikes at Bezos' wedding after tent from Amazon Basics collapses.
That's pretty good.
Okay,
also,
let's move on.
the Venetians
She's not
turned
ready
away
yet.
Mr.
She's not ready.
Bezos' super yacht booking at the big dock in Venice.
that's too bad.
So he's going to have to go row to the. I guess it's
Have to swim through the canal.
It's an island.
The
Well, they're
smelly
going to
canal.
Get a little
Well, they're going to
hepatitis
be
shot.
in islands. Maybe it doesn't smell so bad, the island. That's all I can think of.
Okay, what was the next topic, Marjorie?
The next topic was we're going to talk about Market Basket.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I am amazed that this has been so low profile. Can you do context for people who don't know what the
boy.
latest chapter is?
Well, God,
Want me to do it?
Yeah, you should. 'cause
Okay, everybody
I always
remembers.
want to start at the beginning.
I was too. About a decade ago, in one of the great people-powered
Oh,
things.
I was going to go even further back.
Oh, I don't want to go further back.
Yeah, that's the
RDS.
What
and,
happened? Oh, what was the juicy
And
stuff?
RDT, who is the good Artie, as Shirley
Wait a
Young
minute.
called him.
Sue has the juicy
This
stuff.
is hopeless. Go ahead. What's the juicy
Well,
stuff?
you had the Demoulas lawsuit with Maria Lopez,
the judge.
Maria
Yeah, we know
Lopez,
that.
Lopez.
Stephen Mindich.
That's right.
You had the clerk
Who was
that
the owner of the Phoenix.
the Boston Phoenix.
Yeah.
You had the clerk, Maria's clerk, flown to Canada so that one side could pretend to offer him or her a job, and they secretly recorded him saying he did things for Maria
Look at
Lopez
Marjorie.
in
The
the
happiest
trial,
she's
and then
ever
Maria
been.
Lopez allegedly said something at a restaurant on Charles Street.
Oy.
And this was
Wow.
just the Mula stuff from the 1990s.
And then she yelled at somebody in a courtroom.
That
and
was
got
a
in
whole
trouble.
different one.
That was
Okay,
a different.
and
on
that is-
television.
That was a different
That was on
scandal.
television.
Right,
Yeah,
so
that's
because
right.
they were accusing that the brother who passed away, his kids weren't getting the same
Sure,
money
why
that the
not?
kids
Okay.
got. So then we fast forward to the
No,
big
go
strike.
back to
Hold on.
David and Goliath. Why don't you do that a
That's
little
what I
bit
did.
to get us into that?
I did a profile of Stephen Mindich when I was at
God.
Boston Magazine. I called his mother and his brother and all these family members.
Sure you did.
And they said things that were unbelievable. Like
Really?
either the mother or the brother said, when Stephen gets his teeth in your ankle, it's like a pit bull and you just can't get him loose. I mean, this is like his mother and
My
his
first
brother.
interview with Stephen Mindich,
Yep.
which I went to get on the radio show 1 in 10, which I didn't get hired
Didn't
for.
he own
originally.
FNX?
He owned
He's
FNX,
owned
he owned
FNX
the Boston
and the
Phoenix,
Phoenix.
and all the and I walked in and he sat down and he looked at me and said, "Bisexuals, yes or no?"
Is that really true?
And I went, I
That's
don't
a
know what
pretty
the
good-
question is. He goes,
Yeah.
"Bisexuals, part of the community or not?" And I went, "Yes." And he went, "No, no, no." And I went, "Okay."
Yeah, he was. Boston Phoenix was a great newspaper, though.
So anyway,
and
back to
FNX
the
was a great
Demulises.
station.
Okay, so everybody, well, apparently not everybody. Most people remember about a decade ago, one of the great stories ever. Two cousins went to war about control of the company.
They did.
And when I was on television then at Greater Boston, I regularly would have mid-level executives and employees who basically walked off their jobs with no salaries in support of their boss.
RDT.
Like unheard of.
Good guy.
RDT. Ultimately, RDT prevailed. Fast forward, I think, roughly 10 years. And now there's a fight between RDT and his three sisters. The three sisters combined own more stock in the company than RDT does. They put him on administrative leave because he was allegedly planning some plot of a work stoppage thing. But the amazing part of this, to me, is that none of this has come to a head. This all started 4, 6, 7 weeks ago. He's still suspended, arguably. And by the way, Market Basket under the good RDT has exploded in all positive ways. It's like 900 stores. I mean, it's a huge operation under his
great deals
leadership. So
beautifully kept.
Why is this
help
not?
is wonderful.
I don't understand why it's not coming to a head. And by the way, when I go, as you know, I go every Saturday morning, at least. When in the old days, there were signs in the window urging people not to shop there, to put their receipts from, let's say, Whole Foods or Stop and Shop on the window to show you, which I did, and everybody did in those days. There's no call to action. There's no nothing, and the guy's still on the sidelines. What's going on?
Because we don't know what's going on.
Well, what?
No, I mean, so what I hear is that we don't, and I'm not saying there's anything nefarious, or it's just that the issues that they are trying to work out are ones that are very complicated. Of course, a lot of people feel not having him in the position working is detrimental to the staff since the staff is dedicated to him. On the other hand, we don't know what the problem is that the board was having with him or between each other, which could be financial.
I think they're worried about succession.
Yeah, it could be a number.
That's what I read in the Globe.
There were some kids involved.
Yes.
You've got this family, I mean, joking about going back to the 90s, but remember they
called it Demulis Markets. When did it become Market Basket?
I don't know.
You're an expert. They've had these battles about the family business since, the two brothers, one of the brothers died. So I imagine, I can only imagine if I was in, business with my cousins and what score they would want to settle at some other date if I was going to do something.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Family business, you never know.
To this day, if you're not a Market Basket person, when you see a Market Basket worker, it says his or her name and how long they've worked here, first year, etc. I don't know, some Saturdays I go, early Saturday morning, I ask the workers I see if they've ever met RDT. Almost every single person says yes. And I said, what was that exchange like? He asked me questions about me, about my family. This is a place that has thousands of employees.
They
These are
came
brand
on
new
our show, remember?
workers,
to sing
yes.
the praises of this guy. People that were that had really good jobs and risked losing those really good jobs.
I just want to add one thing. When we were doing this a couple of weeks ago, there was a woman who used to work at Market Basket who said there is some negative behavior, which we should have gone into, Jamie, for the next time we discuss this, about his treatment, I think, of women executives or something that was less than as it should be. And we promised by next time we'll have it. I just wanted to throw that in.
I did not know that either.
But I just want to point out, too, that imagine that you're the majority owner of a company, and then you've got this other person who is beloved by everyone. Imagine the power dynamics that happen there. I mean, so it's the challenges of being on a board in a family business.
That's right.
I want to be called into action. I want to be.
I know. I can
really
tell
do.
you're ready to go.
I'm ready for a battle with
You may have to boycott again, Jim. That would.
I'd be happy
that
to.
Would ruin your Saturday mornings.
I'm going to call Turtle Boy and get Aiden Carey on this right now.
Okay, so Sue, we get a lot of questions from people after the Karen. You did, by the way, and I mean,
great job.
Just
Thank you. Canton Confidential. I loved it.
On this trial, now that it's over, I assume Canton Confidential is sort of over. What's happening?
Yeah, we're doing pop-ups on it as news around the Reed case continues, or the O'Keefe case continues. I think we did one. I was off this week, but we did one this week. As the civil suit continues, will pop up. But we're also looking at ways that we can use it to highlight other issues. During the break between the trials, we did Commonwealth Confidential for a week where we highlighted issues with the state police investigations and public perception of them. So we're looking at ways that we can use
What
it.
is the public perception of them?
Not very good.
Yeah.
You can look at my piece. I think it's still up on the website. But so we're going to look for ways to use it to amplify and promote other things that are happening.
Will you be reporting live from the Bezos wedding or
I'm
remotely?
on my way right now.
You
See,
are
I'm dressed.
on your
I'm
way.
ready to go.
Okay,
I've
fine.
got my gondola hat, and I'm ready. My stick. I'm ready to go. And
Yeah,
my
I saw
nose
Bill
plugs.
Gates walking down the pier looking kind of lonesome. He was there. All the biggies there.
I'm
Jim.
any lonesome, even a millionaire. I don't need like a billionaire. I'd be happy to keep company with.
That's
right
at
now.
Sue, NBC
At Sue.
Boston.
Still
exactly.
not married.
Thank
Still
you
not
very
married.
much. Sue O'Connell, it's great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you
your
very
time.
much, Sue O'Connell. We were speaking with media maven Sue O'Connell, co-publisher at Bay Windows and South End News, commentator and news influencer at NBC Boston. And she's still doing blankety blank confidential. Fill
very
in the
good. I
blank.
like
Could
it.
be Canton confidential.
I like that.
Could be Chelsea confidential. Could be Cambridge confidential. Could be Inman Square confidential.
I don't think so. Thank you.
The true story of Jim Browdy and Market Basket.
Look how you are so simple. I mean, really, what's wrong with you? They're laughing.
How long did Jim spend in the fruit aisle? We don't know. Let's go
And
to the
why
video.
was he there
Why
to
was he
begin
there?
with? Exactly.
Okay. For the 10th year in a row.
Let's see if she can read this.
Boston was ranked number one in the country when it comes to having the worst drivers. And we had the most accidents, the least time between accidents of any place in the country. So many get ready to hit the roads for July 4th. We thought we'd get our thoughts from you on Boston drivers. He's Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. This is Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL. That's the library. It's streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, the Supreme Court is limiting nationwide injunctions that would block the Trump administration's effort to end birthright citizenship. We'll have local reaction. And Massachusetts Congressman Stephen Lynch is defending his vote against impeachment proceedings over President Trump's strikes on Iran last weekend. That and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And Bunker Hill Community Summer mini sessions to achieve college and skills goals. Sessions start June 1st and July 14th. Registration at bhcc.edu/summer.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're live on Monday, then we're off for the rest of the week for July 4th. There'll be best of shows, and they're actually pretty good, I should say. We return the week of the 7th, and on the 9th, which is Wednesday, we'll be back at the library. We'll be here Tuesday of that week, too. But on Wednesday, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth will join us for an hour, 11 to noon, to answer our questions and yours. So a little BPR car talk for this Friday afternoon. Two topics. The first one is this. This week, Boston kept up its streak, coming in dead last, I didn't even know this, for the 10th year running in Allstate's annual Best Drivers Report. That report found Boston drivers, this is incredible, 244% more likely to get in a collision than the average driver in the U.S. The safest driving city is Brownsville, Texas. And by the way, Springfield and Worcester were almost as bad as Boston. So our number is 877-301-8970 to call or text, as so many are expected to hit the roads for the July 4th week. Berkshires, lakes in New Hampshire, the Cape. Do you feel a sick kind of macabre pride at this? Or what do you think it is that makes Massachusetts drivers so distinctly terrible? The second topic is inspired by Billy Baker in the Globe, a couple of pieces this week, and it's an issue that matters a lot to Marjorie. Is driving to the Cape with all the damn bridge and Route 6 traffic really even worth it anymore? The number is 877-301-8970. So why don't you answer both questions? Why are we the worst drivers in America?
I think we're just very, very aggressive here in Boston. People run red lights all the time. I mean, you get to a green light, you better look both ways because you never know when somebody's going to be running a red light. We change lanes. I mean, we're very, very aggressive. I'm kind of an aggressive driver.
Oh, really?
I think it's from all the years, I worked as a reporter. I'm driving around Boston to get to places. You become kind of vicious. in like fighting over parking spaces and stuff like that. I think that's what it's about.
Marjorie said she's a fairly aggressive driver. Let me just say, if you're ever driven in front of Marjorie and you look in your rearview mirror, you say to yourself, hey, that's Marjorie Egan. She's in my back seat. You are a tailgater, and it drives me nuts.
Well, okay.
You are a real tailgater.
I'm a tailgater,
yes,
he says. Who's the person that's hit two people in different accidents from behind because you were tailgating?
I didn't hit. Oh, you hit their cars.
You hit their cars.
I wasn't tailgating. I may not have been paying attention at that particular minute.
All right.
No one was injured in either accident.
Okay.
By the way, do you remember what happened on the first one? I rear-ended this woman on Melnia
That's
Cass.
what happens when you tailgate.
On Melnia Cass Boulevard when we were on the way to our old radio station. Who was the first caller on our radio show on air?
The person you hit.
The woman I hit calls the show to make sure I don't lie about what it is that happened. Okay, here's the second question. You and your sister have your parents' house on the Cape. Going to the Cape, I went to the Cape, I'd say 3 weeks ago to Provincetown. It was sheer torture getting on the Cape.
Yeah.
Sheer torture getting off the Cape. We didn't leave at go on prime hours, a little bit off-peak, but not enough off-peak. It almost made you feel, as you're waiting in line on the way off 7 miles long, as much fun as we had, it wasn't worth it. Where are you on this?
Well, I think you got to go at night. I think if you're going to go to the Cape, like if you're going to go this weekend, I would leave at 10 o'clock tonight. I think that's what you got to do. It's just become ridiculous. Getting out of Boston has become ridiculous. It's not just the Cape. I mean, you try to get from
in the
Boston,
afternoon, it's ridiculous.
On a Saturday afternoon, you leave Boston on a Saturday afternoon to try to get. If you got to come through Boston, either you come through on the Turnpike, you come through 93 South to get to the Braintree split. It can take you 45 minutes. I mean, where's everybody going? I don't know. There's all these cars. But the thing is about the Cape. The thing I would say to people that are leaving the Cape, you have to go a long way. Provincetown, that's a long way, and you got another hour after you cross the bridge to get to Provincetown. But take 6A. It's so much nicer to come back. You're going to have to sit in traffic anyway to come over the bridge. It's much more pleasant to sit in traffic on 6A when you can look at some pretty houses and some pretty little places than to sit in traffic on Route 6. And of course, there is also the service road, Jim, which lots of people don't know about, that runs parallel to 6. So that's a little word to the wise, too.
And an anonymous texter says one of the reasons why they're the worst drivers in America is because Marjorie drives in the bus lane, which, as she has admitted,
I do drive in the bus lane.
Is not only illegal, but is congestion creating.
And the bus lane on Huntington Avenue is one of the things I think this could be the issue in the election, Jim, between Mayor Wu and Josh Kraft, is that Huntington Avenue stretch. When there are no buses coming, the traffic is backed up through 3 lights, and you could drive in the bus lane, and everybody could get through it, and when they see a bus, they'll move out of the way.
Okay, so we have 2 questions. Why, according to the Allstate's annual Best Drivers report, do we have the worst drivers in America for 10 years running? And 2, we're repeating the question that Billy Baker asked in the Globe. Is it even more? He doesn't even he lives on the North Shore, doesn't he?
He went down for that's why he almost never goes. He went away for a weekend. I was shocked at how bad the traffic is.
That's our second question. Is it worth it anymore to go to the Cape because of the horrible driving kind of things? Where do you want to go?
Let's go to Dan in Dorchester. Oh, you were lucky because you're closer if you want to go to the Cape. He's already come through the city of Boston.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Dan.
Yeah, I go to New Hampshire instead. The Cape is a disaster.
Okay.
But I feel like the reason why they look at us as the bad drivers. It's not fair. It's Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, all them coming into our area. They're horrible drivers, and then we have to be a horrible driver right next to them because we got to be a little bit more aggressive to get away from their horrible driving.
Wow.
Okay.
So now it just doesn't seem fair.
Now, Dan, how do you know that it's Rhode Island and Connecticut?
I'm on the road all day long. I'm a route salesman.
Oh, you are?
So I see it. I drive about 30,000 miles a year, and I'm telling you, it's the Connecticut and Rhode Island people.
Okay.
Now,
like
Dan,
Grand Theft Auto out there.
Dan, before you go away, you say you don't go to the Cape, you go to New Hampshire. Marjorie has alleged on this show on numerous occasions that there are no sidewalks in New Hampshire. Can you either affirm
there
or
are some sidewalks.
dispute that, Dan?
I go up to Lake Winnipesaukee, and I have bad news for you, Marjorie. In the downtown areas, they have sidewalks.
Oh
Did you read about Lake Winnipesaukee in the Globe today, Dan?
Yeah, I heard you guys were talking about
horrible
Yeah.
cyanobacteria. You know why?
Well,
Because of climate change. That's the big reason. But the second reason is because people because of septic tanks, and the third reason is because people fertilize their lawns. And they think if they're far enough from the lake, it doesn't matter. It does matter because of the runoff of the water and these torrential rains we get. So when you go up there, tell everybody you know to stop fertilizing, or there's not going to be a lake in Lake Winnipesaukee for that much longer.
Yeah, the last thing to say,
I
Dan.
prefer that over white sharks.
Okay. Well, the problem is, thank you for the call. I'm on a crusade about cyanobacteria. When there's cyanobacteria in the water, you can't swim in it if you are small, like a kid, and it could kill your dog because the dog will drink the water. It's a real hazard. And I often say to people, so having a weed-free lawn is more important to you than polluting the lake you come to visit in the summertime?
I'm with you, Marjorie.
Thank you, Jim.
If you had to rate your own, thank you, Dan. If you had to rate your own driving, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, 1, you are emblematic of us being the worst drivers in America, or 2, you're an excellent driver.
I'm an excellent driver.
No, really? No, you're not.
I am. I would say I'm a very good driver.
What would you say?
I pay a lot of attention. I may be a little aggressive, but I pay a lot of attention.
Well,
I do not tailgate.
Let me ask a question about that. Besides tailgating, if I recall, maybe it wasn't you, somebody looked just like you, someone had a minivan, looked like you, I used to work with, and it not only didn't have a rear bumper, didn't have a back window. Was that you?
Oh, that was good. I had a bike rack in the back of the car, and I backed into something, and forget about the bike rack, and the whole thing.
That. No, not a problem.
The whole thing went out. Somebody hit me with the bumper, Jim. That was the problem. They were tailgating behind me. Okay, let's go to Rodrigo in Washington, D.C.
Hey, Rodrigo.
Ooh, we'll hear about the driving down there.
How are you?
Yeah, well, hey, I'm doing well, thanks. How are you guys doing?
We're
Fine,
very well, thank you.
So I spent some years living in Boston. I just had a couple of thoughts to say.
Please.
First thing is, I once heard that the reason Boston drivers are so aggressive is due to the central artery, because the exits were so closely spaced together. The people were forced to change lanes super quickly when they saw their exit coming up, and they didn't realize it. I don't know how apocryphal that might be.
I think that's what the Big Dig podcast
They talked
said,
about that, how there were big fights, and they ended up putting too many exits off the Big Dig too many exits off before the Big Dig. Yep.
Exactly, but the main reason I'm calling is just to make you guys feel better, because even though you guys might have the highest number of accidents in the country, you have the lowest number of traffic fatalities in the country, which in my opinion is what really matters. Massachusetts has an average of 6.9 deaths per 100,000 people, compared to the national of 13.8.
How do you know that?
Which is way better.
How do you know that?
I did a quick Google search, and then the one which for me is even more important because people not in the cars. It has the lowest pedestrian deaths of any urbanized state.
Wow.
It's behind Iowa, West Virginia, Vermont, Nebraska, and Minnesota, but none of those really have any cities. So
that was a good
all
one.
in all, even though we're crashing cars, at least we're not killing people, which is what all the other states are doing. So we have something going for us.
That is really hopeful, Rodrigo.
Very good
Thank
point.
you. It's sort of a glass half full.
I would have thought the people in Texas were the more aggressive drivers, but I think they have more space there, so they're not.
I've been to
cramped.
Brownsville, Texas.
Yeah.
There are like 3 people in Brownsville,
Yeah, that could be
Texas.
the thing. You get out west.
No,
and
it's
those
not
big
fair,
roads.
by the way. It's not 3 people. It's small.
Utah Salt Flats. You can go for 90 miles
You want
an
to know
hour.
something? When I went to the Rio Grande border, when I was doing legal services, union organizing kind of thing, you can see literally 100 miles. You go on a highway, you can literally see because it's flat.
Yeah,
it's flat.
and you can see the clouds and everything.
Just unbelievable.
You can see the thunderstorms coming.
By
Diane
the way,
from
Jeff
Melrose.
from Andover was the texter who suggested that thing from the Big Dig. Thank you for the info, Jeff.
Diane from Melrose says, driving in Boston is like shopping at Market Basket. If you don't cut people off, you won't get anywhere. And our producer, Zoe, says, that's right. She drove a Mini Cooper through flash flooding on Morrissey Boulevard. And I think she lost her car. Did she lose her car? She lost her car.
Very sad.
Yeah, Mini Coopers, great cars. They're kind of low to the ground.
Yeah.
You have to watch out for Morrissey Boulevard when it
do.
rains hard. Let's go to Sue in New Hampshire. Hi, Sue.
Hello, Sue.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm calling because there's an echo. What is this?
No,
Don't worry about it. It's our fault.
We know it's horrible, but it's our fault. We hear you fine.
She got discouraged and hung up, Jim.
I don't blame her. Okay, if you hear an echo, by the way, it's a nightmare. We don't hear it.
We're sorry about that.
The listeners don't. I know it's a pain in the behind, but we hear you fine.
Eric in Arlington is on the phone. Thank you, Eric.
What's going on?
Hey, how are you?
Excellent.
So I think one of the main reasons that accidents are so prevalent here is the signage is terrible. One of the worst I've seen in the country.
I agree with that.
And So you got all these people from outside the city who are lost because they can't tell about the signs, and then the people from inside the city get so annoyed at those people from outside the city.
That's a good theory.
Another person has thought a lot about this.
That's a good theory.
Eric,
I like
thank
it.
you. That was excellent. We appreciate your
Kate from
analysis.
Burlington says she's from Michigan originally, and she says Bostonians are terrible drivers. Terrible, 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 terrible. You're aggressive. No concept of right of way. You do things illegally you think are legal. Like the left, take a left when the light turns. You drive too slow in the passing lane, and basically you all stink. So she's not.
Also, look how narrow.
But driving in the passing lane is another big problem. State police should pull people over for that.
Yeah.
They don't go fast enough in the passing lane.
That.
Passing lane. You know what passing lane is for?
Passing.
Passing.
I know. That's why one of the reasons they call it that. Is that
is
what
correct.
your analysis
But people
is?
sit there in the passing lane holding up all the traffic.
You know what Jamie just said?
What did he say?
Just like the passing lane is for passing, you know what the bus lane is for? Buses.
Buses, except when there are no buses, and then it should be for everybody else. Hi, guys. The first book I purchased after arriving in
By the way,
Cambridge.
for new listeners, Marjorie admits she drives in the bus lane, and her pathetic excuse is she doesn't see anybody coming. And what she is in denial about is when a bus is coming and she's blocked in the lane because the roads are so congested, she screws everybody on the bus.
I don't.
What do you do?
I'm going to give you the Huntington Avenue challenge.
Go ahead.
Instead of driving back to Cambridge this afternoon, you should drive go up right
I
up
plan
there
to do that.
and take a right on
I'm gonna do
Huntington
that.
Avenue
I'm gonna
and
do that.
see how ridiculous the bus lane is on Huntington Avenue. It's the same thing on Washington Street.
Well, let me ask a
by
question.
the way.
Since it's illegal to drive in the bus lane, should I drive up on the sidewalk to get home faster?
No,
it's illegal.
But when you're holding up like 50 cars in traffic because the bus line is empty,
Bus
and
lane.
you have a view for many blocks where there's one in front of you or where
illegal.
there's one behind you, it is kind of silly.
It's illegal.
It's waste. You know what it's contributing to, Jim?
No.
The greenhouse gas problem.
877-301-8970 is the number. We have two questions on the table. One, Allstate's annual best drivers report came out. We're the worst drivers. Boston, number one worst drivers, and Worcester and Springfield is very close behind. And number two, again, inspired by Billy Baker and a couple of pieces he wrote in the Globe, I think this week, is driving to the Cape worth it anymore considering the huge backups? Do you, when you're driving to the Cape on Route 3, aren't you anxious when you're moving quickly, worried about the moment when it all stops and you look at the mile marker and it says like 7 miles
to the bridge?
Sagamore?
Yeah.
I mean, how painful is that?
Well, you can go a different way. You can take 128 to 24 south to 495
Incredible.
to 25, and then take the scenic Cape Cod
Does that get you right
Cranberry
on the
Highway.
bridge?
Yeah, it gets you on the bridge. You can take the Bourne Bridge if
Look
you
how
want.
proud she is.
Or you can take the scenic highway that goes along the canal. What's kind of too bad is the trees are growing up too high. You used to be able to see the whole canal there.
Yeah.
And there's some great little, takeout fried food places.
There are?
Fried clam places, yeah.
You don't eat
on
fried
the
clams.
Scenic Cranberry Highway. I don't, but you do.
I do.
Mike in Tiverton. Oops, Tiverton.
Well, Tiverton. It's Tiverton.
I think
Hi,
it's
Mike in
Rhode
Tiverton.
Island.
Welcome.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, good afternoon.
See you too.
First, the driver that only goes to New Hampshire, and of course, in this blame generation, it's all the fault of Connecticut and Rhode Island drivers. If they were so bad, why don't their states get rated the worst?
That is an excellent analysis. Keep going. You're doing great, Mike.
Also, addressing the Cape traffic, we are very fortunate where we are down in Rhode Island to have lovely beaches, easy to reach, not too much traffic.
You do.
And a week or two of good weather on either end of the season, making it longer than Cape Cod.
Wow.
You have the most beautiful beaches in Rhode Island. If you ask me, down by URI there, Kingston, South Kingston, the beaches in Newport, beaches along, those are in Westport, Little Compton, the beaches with biblical names. What are those names down there?
Narragansett, Westerly, Matunic, Charlestown.
Yeah.
Those are biblical?
No, there's biblical names down near the ferry, but I forget what
Mike,
they are.
you did a wonderful.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that.
You're doing a great job defending Rhode Island. That was excellent. Do they have Mike? Is Mike still there? Oh, it's too late.
Yeah.
Okay.
You feel everywhere you go, you can see the water practically in Rhode Island.
So why do you have a house? Why don't you have a house in Rhode Island rather than the Cape?
Because I was lucky that my father a million years ago bought one on the Cape, and I'm very grateful.
Mike from Tiverton is back. A lot of listeners want to know. Oh, now he hung up.
He's gone now.
Okay, let's go to 877-301-8970.
An anonymous texter says the Cape is worth it if you want to get the Jim Browdy discount on leather goods in Provincetown. There you go.
Well, I used to own a leather shop
He
in
did.
Provincetown a long time ago.
Jim was a leather merchant in Provincetown.
I was. What's so funny about that?
I just think it's a
I
riot.
was a leather merchant in Provincetown. I was. Sold handcrafted leather goods.
That's right.
Head shop material, records. I did quite well.
Those were the days.
Those were they actually were the days.
Jeff from Worcester, thank you for
What's
calling.
so funny about that, by the way?
I don't know. Jeff from Worcester.
You know what they're making a movie about, by the way? And he was there at the exact same time. I have no idea if I knew him. It was Anthony Bourdain. They're doing a movie about his Provincetown years. Is happening right now. Who's playing Anthony Bourdain? Does anybody know?
I don't know, but
look it up and
that's
let
a
us
great
know?
part of his book, his wild days in the restaurants down in Provincetown.
Kitchen Confidential? Is that what it was?
Kitchen Confidential, yeah. Jeff in Worcester, thanks for calling.
Before you go ahead, was that one of the most exciting segments we ever had?
When we had him here?
We had him here at the
library.
library.
God, we were both kind of drooling.
And I had him on TV.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable. Jeff in Worcester, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Welcome. Hi, Jeff. This is where you say, hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call. Okay, Jeff will put you on hold, and we'll get back to you in a second. He's being played by Dominic Sessa.
Never heard of
from
him.
The Holdovers, is who's playing the young Anthony Bourdain.
Here's a good one. This is from George Carlin. Anyone driving slower than you is an idiot. Anyone driving faster than you is a maniac. Sent to us via Dan and Randolph. Thank you, Dan.
877-301-8970 is the number. We're going now to Jeff in Worcester. Are you there this time,
Hi,
Jeff?
Hey, guys, I'm here. Yeah,
Hi.
so I got this theory about people not liking other people driving into different states.
Please.
So the roads are designed differently in Rhode Island to Massachusetts to Florida. So driving my whole life in Connecticut and then driving in Massachusetts, I noticed that the corners are shaped differently. The stop signs are differently. Parking in a parking lot is just a little bit different. So it would assume that you would think that Rhode Island drivers are worse because they're used to driving on their kinds of roads.
Yeah,
What do you think of that? You know, I don't know.
I don't think they're worse, and there's not as much congestion. I mean, really, Jeff, is there? I mean, maybe getting back from the beach on a really sunny day, there's congestion, but even Providence isn't very congested compared to Boston. And driving to Boston, you just go on 195 there.
Jeff from Worcester, thank you for your call. We really appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
We even mentioned how slow you drive. That's another thing. Jim drives like 50 miles an hour.
You know why I drive 50 miles an hour?
He's like Michael Dukakis.
When the side of the road says 50, you know how fast I drive? 50 miles an hour.
It never says 50.
Want me to tell my Michael Dukakis story?
55.
Okay, so I'm driving on the turnpike about maybe 20 years ago. And I am in the right lane because I don't drive as fast as Marjorie. Mm-hmm. And everybody is passing me, and even people behind me exceeding the speed limit. I only see one car that is apparently obeying the speed limit. I am going faster than the speed limit, and the reason is because there are people on my rear bumper, and I'm nervous about it. So I'm finally able to slow down, and I look into the car, which is the only car that is going what the speed limit was, which is 55 miles an hour. I look into the car, and a guy waves at me, and it's Michael Dukakis, which is, I think he was still, no, he wasn't governor at that point.
Yeah.
But that is who Dukakis is.
Yeah,
He's
no.
a law-abiding, whatever. You're not criticizing him, are you?
No. Well, Michael Dukakis is such a
one
good
of the
guy.
greats. One
He's
of the
such a
true
good guy.
greats.
He just lost his wife, and they've been married
Who's another
forever.
one of the true greats.
Yeah. Jason Statham, have you heard of him?
Yeah, you have to tell a long story. Don't do this.
Okay, he's going to make an appearance as Anthony Bourdain in the biopic as the rugged leather merchant.
No, who was the guest who said she looked like Nicole Kidman? Okay, Jay Farrow, the comedian, was here one day. And He looks at Marjorie. He's totally taken over. And he says, you look just like Nicole Kidman.
I know, I got such a thrill.
And he says, I look like this guy who's like 100, who's an actor, who's like one of those grizzled, beaten down. And that was the joke, which wasn't that funny.
Yeah, well, lots of people like to make jokes. People are really into this whole Dickie thing about you, Jim.
Yeah, we don't have to explain that either.
Marjorie, I once crashed my car driving to Jim's leather shop to get myself a handcrafted leather.
Okay, fine.
Dickie.
When I was a kid, look up Dickie, Google it. We don't have time for this, really. Marjorie's amusing herself to the great disadvantage of our audience, such as it is.
Elena from Providence.
Thank God this is almost over.
Thank you for calling.
Elena in Providence. Talk as long as you want to stop Marjorie,
My mother
please.
had a few Dickies lying around.
She did.
Hi.
I think I knew her, actually. I remember her from Providence, right?
Yeah,
Exactly,
sure.
I knew her. Go ahead. Elena, what's up?
Long-time listener. So I used to live in Sudbury for a long, long time, and then in Weston. And anyway, so I know the Boston drivers, very aggressive. Now we live in Providence. They're equally aggressive down here, but it's worse. They're mean in Providence.
Really? What do you mean mean? Give us an example of mean.
You know, like people are not going to let you in. If you want to get over and they see you're like, oh my gosh, my exit's coming up, they're not going to let you in for anything.
You know, can I tell you, though, I am on both sides on that issue, Elena, in all fairness. When I want to get in because I was in the wrong lane, I obviously am angry when they won't let you in. But if you do the right thing and you stay in the right lane, the proper lane, and you're there forever, and some a-hole pulls up on the side and tries to squeeze in, aren't you torn as to whether or not you should be a good citizen or not? Isn't there some sort of that kind of thing?
I agree with you 100%. I hate those people that come up on the left and come in at the last minute.
Yeah.
Hate that. That's
They're
not
awful.
what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm talking about like on the little, city roads downtown.
Got it.
You know, and they're just mean. They're just mean.
Well, it's clear you're angry about
But
it.
we love Providence. Everybody should move to Providence.
We love
in my opinion.
Providence is a great place.
We're both big fans of Providence. It's great. Elena, thank you for
love
the
it.
call. We really appreciate
Love
it.
Yeah, somebody said they knocked down a bridge there, the Washington Bridge, going into Providence because it was unsafe, and so it's been difficult driving there of late. We have a lot of people trashing Rhode Island drivers. Jim from Framingham, we
You
have
have 30
time
seconds,
for one more
Jim.
call. Thank you for calling.
So I have two major points to make.
They got to be quick.
Okay.
Population of Massachusetts is 16th in the country.
Yeah.
But area is 44.
Wow.
So we have far more people per square
Beautiful.
mile
Great
than
analysis.
other states do.
What's your
Go to
second
New
point?
York
That was
and try to
excellent.
get on the GW
Got
Bridge.
it. That's brilliant.
So
What's the
you're
second?
in the lane that you need to be on to get on the bridge.
Right.
And dozens of cars are in that lane. Jim, you were just complaining about this.
I was.
Car after car after car going up to the intersection and cutting in.
What's your
Not a
second
thing you
point,
can
really
do.
quickly, Jim?
That was it.
Oh,
That
was
it.
excellent.
The other was about population
Both of them were
density.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah.
you for making the. What did we ask? Oh,
Jared is here.
We're talking about driving.
Jared is
I forgot what we were
touring
talking
with
about. How does Jared Bone? by the way?
45 miles an hour on the Mass Pike.
Well, I bet you he's not a fast. Oh, you probably are a fast driver, aren't you?
I passed you once on the highway.
Is that really true?
I remember honking
Everybody.
at you and beeping, and you were just driving along.
Really?
Everybody passes him. He's like a menace on the
That's
highway.
funny.
He's like a great grandmother on the highway.
Okay, thank you. Do you go to the
Wearing
Cape
his
or you
dicky.
don't?
Only about once a season.
Is that because of the horrible traffic or something
Partly,
else?
yeah.
Oh,
Although
wow.
the ferry down to the Cape is fantastic. Of
Yeah,
course.
and they have a train from
Fast
South
road, 90
Station
minutes
to
fast road.
Hyannis.
You ever taken
too.
the train, by the way?
No, I should
What do
take
you
the
do when you
train.
get to Hyannis, though, if you're not staying in Hyannis?
Well, you have someone come pick you up.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay,
but you're
well, that's
in
good.
it doesn't do any good in Provincetown.
Horrible.
Well, you hitchhike, and John Waters picks you up, and you
That's
just
right, that's
bicycle
right.
the rest of the way.
Okay,
are you
so
doing?
what are you
doing?
doing on that show thing?
So we're going to be talking about Anna Wintour stepping
Ooh,
down.
I know.
Yes.
And picking like a
from
pool
Vogue.
boy to be head of the magazine, right, or something?
Well, yeah, I mean, she's definitely not ceding control. I mean, this is kind of her growing and growing
But
even
it's
more
like a little
powerful.
pretty boy. She's picking a six-seater. That I got the wrong story? Whatever. Go ahead. Next.
Has anyone ever seen her without the sunglasses on?
No.
Well,
Or how
sometimes.
about without the bangs?
Without the bangs.
That
What's that
we've never
about?
seen.
Never.
No.
Yeah, never seen.
No, sometimes.
Does she have blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes? Do we know?
Very good
I don't
question.
know.
Okay,
I don't know
next.
either. Okay.
And then we'll be talking about the first same-sex sex scene happening on daytime television.
Oh, my
And
God.
the soap opera Beyond the Gates.
Oh,
Pushing
really?
some boundaries.
Oh.
And then we'll
Men and women.
two women.
Ooh.
And Margie's going to say, of course.
Well, I think it is probably less
People are less
controversial.
uncomfortable with it,
Yeah.
is your contention.
I know. I was thinking about that as
Yeah.
I was reading this. I'm sure that's probably the case, and
Yeah.
lots more, including Boston Calling taking a gap year this year.
I know. That's kind of too
or
bad,
next year, I
huh?
should say. Yeah.
The only person who's offered an explanation is Mayor Wu, right? So
Yep.
far? Yeah.
She's the only one,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Okay.
it's weird.
All right, well, it's
Okay.
really nice to see you. He will be live here at the library with his teammates in exactly 3 minutes. So if you're here, don't go away. It's a fabulous show.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thank you for people that came down to the library. It really means a
Thank
lot
you all.
to us. Keep up with the
Does.
24/7 way of our podcast. Check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Monday, we're going to be joined by political commentator Anand Girdadas, BC economist Juliet Shore about the 4-day work week. Boston Globe travel writer Christopher Muther, who's a riot, and retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, again, going to catch us up in the Supreme Court.
Can I add one guest that we just got in the
Yes.
last few minutes? the owner of Suya Joint, and they make the fabulous meat pies here that sell at the Newsfeed Cafe. Her name is Cecilia Lizotte. She's terrific. Is joining us on Monday. Her brother and the general manager of her operation, Paul, has been detained by ICE.
Oh, my gosh.
And she's going to talk about that and the impact. That's Monday. She'll join us on the radio.
Okay, I'm very sorry about that.
I'm glad she's doing it, though.
I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. We hope she feels better. With additional support from Nia Harmon, our engineer, John the Cloth Parker, our executive producer, Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Guy, Patrick Lally, Angelica Marrero, Juan Jose Cadena, our host at the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. The Culture Show with Jared Bowen comes on right after we are done. Here on 89.7 GBH. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in today. Hope you can tune in again on Monday. Enjoy the Culture Show and have a great weekend.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Insurance coverage from healthcare experts for businesses, individuals, families, and retirees. Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Learn more at mgbhp.org/everyday. From the sweaty basement bars of New York to the glittering peak of the global charts, take a look at how disco conquered the world through its origins, triumphs, and legacy. Disco, Soundtrack of a Revolution, continues tomorrow night at 7 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up today on The Culture Show, at Vogue there are some very expensive shoes to fill. Anna Wintour is stepping down as the editor-in-chief. She's legendary for her omnipresent sunglasses, discerning taste, and her distinct resemblance to the Helen Heels diva boss in The Devil Wears Prada.
Hey, tell Simone I'm not going to prove that girl that she sent me for the Brazilian layout. I asked for clean, athletic, smiling. She sent me dirty, tired, and paunchy.
From there, it's bombs away. I'm not talking about the U.S. missile strikes on Iran. I'm talking about the executive expletive. President Trump dropping the F-bomb on live TV while talking to reporters outside the White House.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
For a man known to use coarse language, it was still startling, and his F-bomb had media outlets scrambling.
You dropped the bomb on me, baby. You dropped the bomb on me.
What do you do when the president swears while talking about something newsworthy?
C-SPAN was like, it's okay, nobody's watching anyway.
Plus, Boston Calling is calling it off. The music festival is taking a gap year. While no official reason has been given, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has a theory.
Because next year will be so busy between 250th anniversary celebrations, between FIFA coming, that it'd be better to enjoy the Boston Calling event bigger and better when it does come back.
And the Roxbury Public Library is being renamed in honor of Sarah Ann Shaw, Boston's first black female TV reporter.
Be proud of who you are and demand respect for what you do.
She was known for giving a voice to underserved communities.
I've tried to explain various ethnic and racial communities to people who don't live in those communities. I've tried to be a bridge.
Speaking of trailblazers, a new documentary on Barbara Walters explores her career as a groundbreaking broadcast journalist who fought her way to the top, forever changing the newsmaker interview.
You're surrounded by beautiful flowers, the lighting is perfect, and then suddenly she would just throw a hardball out of nowhere.
Are you sorry you didn't burn the tapes? Did you ever order anyone killed?
We take on that and more right now on our Arts and Culture Week in Review.
Thank you very much. This is Barbara Wawa saying have a pleasant weekend.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Welcome to The Culture Show, live from the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen.
Lisa Simmons.
And I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We're going over the week's top arts and culture headlines, starting with Anna Wintour. She is stepping down as editor-in-chief of American Vogue after 37 years at the helm. For decades, she has coolly controlled the rhythms of fashion the world over, all with a steely precision, which is why she's also not really stepping down. She'll remain global editorial director and chief content officer for Condé Nast, which oversees more than nearly 24 publications, including GQ, Vanity Fair, and Bon Appetit magazines. So the headlines, I think, just stopped the fashion world and a lot of the other media world in its tracks yesterday, because we know the hold that Anna Wintour has had over fashion and certainly Vogue. But what's really interesting here is that she's stepping up into this now global position and abandoning the position that she had, editor-in-chief, in her wake, and then somebody else will come in and have some level of power but still report directly to her.
Yeah, it's like it is a promotion. As best
well,
as
I mean,
can read it.
they're different.
Of course.
Right. So I think that's really interesting to hear that she's stepping away from fashion, so to speak. And I'm wondering, I met her in the hallway, actually, in the elevator. I didn't even know it was her. I got
what
in.
What elevator? Where?
In New York, because I was doing some tourism stuff. Anyway, that's a non sequitur. So anyway, but the interesting.
I saw her from a distance at the Museum of Fine Arts when she was here for the Mario Testino photography show, but I only saw her from a distance by design.
I was like, but I mean, I do think this is interesting. I think it's interesting because there was this controversy this year, right, about the Met Gala and how Trump is not invited to the Met Gala, and it actually he's like not on the invitation list, and I think it's something that bothers him. So that did come up again. That did come up this year. So I think, I mean, people are moving on, and this is a great. Maybe she wants to do Condé Nast now, and she's opening up space for other people to be in the fashion industry.
Yeah,
no? I know.
Well,
exactly.
no. I mean, I think on the one hand, you look at it, and it is. It reminds me a little bit. I'm going to do a sports metaphor here.
Okay.
Where you have a team with a veteran quarterback, and that quarterback is coming to the end of their career, and then you draft a young quarterback with the hopes being that this veteran quarterback in their final couple years are going to mentor and groom this younger quarterback to eventually take over for them, right? So there's a strain of that, it looks like, happening here. The other thing here is they're in a difficult position, right? Because it is the double-edged sword of a business, and in particular a business that is in some sort of artistic endeavor of some kind.
Exactly.
Where the leader and the brand are so inextricably linked, right? So you think about, she didn't start Vogue, but she is
37
Vogue.
years.
Right.
I mean, you might as well
at this
be
point.
Vogue.
But you think about the idea, it's like when Jim Henson dies and the Jim Henson Company has to continue on. Or if you look at, something like Apple, when Steve Jobs dies,
but those
it's
are
a very tricky thing to then move on to the next stage when when your brand is the person who is the leader.
And what's so interesting here is that she's not associated simply with Vogue and Condé Nast, because she is a woman who has had this extraordinary impact on fashion and companies and individuals and designers and artists and enterprises and economies all around the world. Because if you remember, there's that very pivotal scene in The Devil Wears Prada, and for people who are wondering, The Devil Wears Prada, the book, was written by one of her former assistants, so the character of Miranda Priestley, played by Meryl Streep, people think, well, yes, that's
by the way.
Thinly veiled.
Thinly veiled,
Yes,
very much.
Maybe it is about her.
But there is that really extraordinary exchange that I always remember from that film, where when Anne Hathaway's character makes a dismissive comment about the color of her sweater or something like that, and Miranda Priestley goes on this huge exposition about why that this is so significant, because everything is literally by design.
Right.
But this is exactly what Anna Wintour has done. Again, as I say, she's had her hand in all of this. To have a sense of the control that she's had, here's a scene from the 2009 documentary, The September Issue, a look into her role in the fashion industry.
Nobody was wearing fur until Anna put it back on the cover of Vogue back in the early 90s, and she ignited the entire industry. If we get behind something, it sells.
For once, Prada was in great debate this season. Anna had a lot of concerns over the fabric and spoke with Mrs. Prada on your behalf many times.
We felt that the pieces were just so heavy that you couldn't wear it. So, Virginia, what was it that they're going to reinterpret? Because we really pushed.
And the takeaway there is that whenever she pushed, something changed or something gave, and so this is why I think we understand that she's not completely stepping away. But yeah, to your point, Edgar, she'll be very firmly in control of who steps into her wake and still works alongside her.
Right, and I think that that's important because she isn't a figure who's passed away, so she's going to be very much.
She's like Pope Emeritus,
yes,
right?
exactly. She's going to be influencing all of the things that are going to be going on.
It's an interesting question to ask yourself: is whether or not, she is such, to your point, Jared, she is such an influential figure. You sort of wonder is it that there is something about her and she is really the only one who can do that? Or is it just that there needs to be somebody that people agree on that will do that? Which is to say, it's like leadership. A lot of times people will be like, well, we'll change the leader of this country. And then people say, well, no, actually, the leader isn't the thing. It's the nature of the country or the way it's operating, that is the only leader that you can have.
Well, you always had Diana Vreeland before her and Grace Mirabella before her, always very influential figures, but I think she brought it to a different level. And I think there is something that is mixed into this, in that if you think about Anna Wintour or Diana Vreeland, they were both people who styled themselves and created this personality of somebody who was inaccessible and who a lot of people feared.
Right, and I think that fear helped her get to where she is, but it also allowed her to stand up in these rooms, with men, especially designers, that people did fear her. And I think it's so funny when you hear that and you say, well, we'll talk to Mrs. Prada, people were like, what did Anna Wintour say? Like, how did she feel about that? And so, but I still think she's going to have a huge influence on the fashion industry and definitely an influence on who they choose to be their successor.
For sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and we also have to remember that she created a lot of these designers, so they always felt, for a large part, from what I've read anyway, always felt a lot of loyalty to her, so she had that going for her, especially decades into the job.
And she's still going to do the Met Gala, so I think Trump's still out of it.
We'll see next year. Well, from the fashion house, we're on to the White House and President Trump's four-letter fury. Earlier this week, he was speaking to reporters outside the White House on live television when he aired his frustrations over the fact that Israel and Iran had violated a ceasefire with airstrikes. That's when he dropped his own F-bomb, as we hear here.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Yeah, so that was the President of the United States. Certainly not without precedent. I mean, we know, we've heard the Nixon tapes, but of course that was in private. There have been descriptions about Lyndon Baines Johnson. We know that there was
Bush and
Biden. When Biden thought he was muffled and he was leaning over to President Obama, and so that was a big deal.
Presidents are people too.
Right, but this...
And that's fine, but they also have to have some sort of decorum.
Right,
I
so
think.
this became the question this week.
Yes, this became the question. But you have a lot of his supporters who are saying, yes, I like that hard, tough, vernacular, and that's what we need more of. And others who are like, this is the presidency. This is the leader of the free world, and there needs to be some sense of decorum. I mean, I know it's you're angry and you're frustrated, and there's so much that goes into what happened, and he has a right to be frustrated and angry. But I do think, in my opinion, that's something that that doesn't need to be said.
I also wonder, if you take a step away from, whether it's, proper or not, which I think is absolutely like one of the talking points here. But I think this is a little bit of an outgrade. If you look at communication style, right? Mm-hmm. The way that this president in particular tends to communicate. The thing is like, let's imagine he starts baseline at like volume all the way up to number 9, right? And so there is he uses exaggeration, and he uses a lot of force in talking about even just the plainest little things. So he doesn't have a lot of room to go up from there to be like, no, this time I'm serious, right? It's like a parent who's screaming all the time. If you're screaming all the time, how do you actually communicate something when you're trying to say to your kid, no, this time you do need to listen. So he has no room to go up, so he has to go all the way to the F word to be like, this time I really am serious, everybody.
Well, the interesting thing, too, I think about this is that if you go back and you listen to the tape, but if you look at it, this is a man who is exasperated this week. And, and where we know that these speeches are crafted and they're intended to portray a character, and often he wants to land something incendiary that gets headlines. This did seem fairly off the cuff, and I am so frustrated right now because I've lost control, basically, in this situation. He thought he had brokered a ceasefire that hours later was violated, that there was legitimate anger here. But I'm with you, Lisa, especially maybe it's a generational thing too, but it's hard to abide by the president outside of a hot mic or outside of the confines of the White House in front of the American public, dropping F-bombs or any other swear words.
Right, exactly. And I think that, exactly. I understand his frustration, and I know that, it made him look bad in the eyes of, when he said he went and did that. But, it's sort of like we all are in that position. And so, I think that if he had just stepped back, take a breath, but like you said, we have a president who uses crude language and has been doing this on the campaign trail and everything. So, it shouldn't be shocking.
Yeah,
but I think it's
that's the thing. I don't
way.
think it was. I guess it is a little bit shocked. Were you? Let me ask that. Were you shocked?
Not shocked
to hear this.
I was a little bit.
Actually,
Honestly,
you know what? Maybe I was a little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I think
shocked.
now that I think about that, I think I was a little bit too. Right? Like it's so surprising.
And Sky News had to apologize.
Because they were broadcasting
because they were broadcasting.
Well, this is the interesting thing. If any of the three of us were to swear right now on this show, we would be facing FCC violations.
Right. Yes.
And
so they had to do this big apology for them.
But I was less shocked when I heard, actually Edgar pointed it out to me, that the vice president had used the middle finger this week in a speech that he was giving, and he was talking about the pink-haired people that approach him in Washington. We have a picture if you're streaming on YouTube.
We're number
GBH News right now, or if you're here at the library. Yes, he was saying that that was his suggestion, that they were the pink-haired protesters were basically reflecting on the fact that Republicans are number one. But this came on the heels of what the president had said, and this one seemed a little contrived.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think that, because he got the okay to be able to do something like this, right? So he's like, I'm going to take this moment as well and to do this, and go against these people who are obviously against me. But it's just a continuation of this provocation, right?
Yeah, and so I think this is in some ways very different because this is he was trying to make a joke here, right? And also
at a dinner,
and it was at a dinner. It was a Republican Party dinner, right? So as we all learned in Public Speaking 101, know your audience. And right now, it sort of feels like you could see why he would think that joke was going to land in that particular audience. It reminds me a little. It's like that. It's of that same type as like the Let's Go Brandon stuff, and this very strong strain of teenage boy humor that runs through the Republican Party, and it's just kind of like, come on, guys, come on.
Well, how many parents have a more difficult job this week after their kids can say, well, I can say it if the president can say it, or the vice president can do that, I can do it.
That is exactly what I would. I would tell the nuns that if I were in class. I'd be like, well, the president said it, I don't know.
Well, up next, the soap opera Beyond the Gates.
That is some excellent theme music.
That is excellent.
It went beyond broadcast conventions this week, airing the first daytime TV same-sex love scene. So there was a lot of debate this week about what we're seeing and when we're seeing it. So we go from the president using the F word basically on daytime television, because that's when that happened, to the Beyond the Gates, which is this brand new soap opera, the first new one since I think 1999.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they have made every intention to reflect real life, and they have two lesbian characters on this show, and they had a sex scene this week. Here's a clip from the show when the Dupree family heiress Chelsea Hamilton and Dr. Madison Montgomery, her father's doctor, exactly, they love their alliteration, they discussed their night of passion.
Can I just say, wow. Honestly, that's the kind of medical attention that I could get used to. Trust me, this was entirely unprofessional. But you did make my heart race in ways that are definitely not FDA approved.
Does anybody want to get a job writing for Beyond the Gates?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Are you kidding me?
Do you know
Yeah.
somebody? I'm in.
Don't.
That sounds like fun.
So what do we think of this?
I mean, I think it's great. I think it's very interesting because, Beyond the Gates is the first all-black soap opera ever, to be on television. So that's a historic
And it's
first.
made in partnership with the NAACP, which is fascinating.
I think that's fascinating. And I think that, we are moving to a whole different audience, right? I mean, there's less soap operas. So now we're trying to bring in this sort of like daytimey, kind of like real TV kind of, product for another generation. So I think it's bold. I think you have to push your audiences. I think you have a traditional audience that you're afraid is not going to accept this, but then you have a whole nother audience that you're getting into that you need to provide content for. And I think that I think it's great. I think that doing it and doing it authentically and not just sort of having a character show up and be like, oh yeah, you're going to play this. I think that they have done a lot of thought around it.
Because they are a character already,
Yes.
and a visiting character, as we may have seen in other eras.
I think the other thing is you got to, it's easy to roll your eyes at the idea of the soap opera.
Right.
But in terms of its place in the culture of television and content and radio, for that matter, it's in the pantheon, right?
Yes.
Like shows, like when you think about like Guiding Light, which
General Hospital.
my mom watched Guiding Light, and I remember like sort of looking into it to know more about it. That thing was on like radio for 40 years, seamlessly went over into television, and it was on the air for like 80 years or something like that. So these things, like this, the notion of the soap opera as a thing definitely still has relevance and resonance, and I just love that they are trying to figure out what does it look like in 2025 to have a soap opera, because I think we often make the mistake, or we see the mistake being made as people are trying to figure out this crowded and fractured marketplace, that old ideas are no good anymore. And actually, the core of the idea can often be good. You just have to figure out how to present it today.
You have to redo
and
it for a
the
new
idea
audience.
of a soap opera, it's still gonna work.
And it got renewed right away for its second season.
Well, and we also have to make the distinction that I see a lot of soap operas actually because one of our monitors in the studio back in Brighton always has one of the soap operas on. I can't watch Beyond the Gates because it conflicts with the culture show.
Oh, yes, that's true. It's on it too.
Exactly.
But it streams
So
too.
I see
It's 2025, so you can watch it in stream.
That's right. You can take the culture show wherever you want to take us with you too
Great
on our
point.
podcast. But I frequently look up and see nipples because there are lots of bare-chested men because we see lots of heterosexual relationships. So one could also argue it's about time that this would be represented too, because it's not like the depiction of sex hasn't already worked its way into daytime television.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, I think it's great.
And it is another. I mean, sure, it's getting attention. We're sitting here talking about it, but the fact that it happens is another marker of, I think, the slow sort of stepping in the right direction when it comes to same-sex partnerships in the United States of America, which is an increase that we should be seeing as a normal thing.
Because it's also a responsibility knowing that when you have a show like The Guiding Light or now Beyond the Gates that is on for years and years and years, and they're in people's homes every day, we know that popular culture has moved society forward. People are more comfortable with these kinds of relationships where they may not have been in the past because they spend day in and day out with these characters and their families, and they get invested in the relationships. And what's the natural evolution of most relationships is something like this happens. And so this has a part to play in how society operates and moves forward.
And the impact on society. I think you're absolutely right. That's very good.
Well, coming up, a nightmare at the museum, how selfie-obsessed tourists are wreaking havoc with artwork. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, the Supreme Court is limiting nationwide injunctions that would block the Trump administration's effort to end birthright citizenship. We'll have local reaction. And Massachusetts Congressman Stephen Lynch is defending his vote against impeachment proceedings over President Trump's strikes on Iran last weekend. That and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Cape Playhouse in Dennis Village, now playing Rent, an unforgettable musical that changed Broadway. Tickets at capeplayhouse.com. And the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum with Ming Fei, Edge of the Garden, a profound and playful exhibition filled with sculptures of oversized fruits and hybrid plants, opening June 26th. More at gardnermuseum.org. Elevate your brand and support local journalism with a GBH sponsorship. Your custom sponsorship package can include audio, video, digital, and events. Learn more at gbh.org/sponsorship.
From your neighborhood to your newsfeed, GBH News is your trusted source for the news that matters to you. Find us wherever you are at GBH News and always at GBH 89.7. GBH News, what matters to you.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-host Edgar B. Horick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. She's the artistic and executive director of the Roxbury International Film Festival underway and program manager at Mass Cultural Council. If you're just tuning in, we're going over the latest arts and culture headlines, which includes Italy, the Instagram hotspot. The country has been the scene of some recent art crimes, starting with what the New York Times described as a sit-and-run incident at a gallery in Verona. A selfie-obsessed tourist sat on a crystal-encrusted chair which collapsed beneath him. The legs buckled, and the surveillance photo showed both him and his companion dashing out of the room. And in Florence, at the Uffizi Gallery, a tourist tried to take a selfie with a 17th century Medici portrait, but he tripped over a protective barrier and broke his fall by putting his hand through the masterpiece. If you're watching on our GBH News YouTube channel or here at the library, you can see the painting here. This is before that happened because it's...
Now it's got a big fist through it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not on view. In fact, the whole exhibition is shut down, which is reflective of the fact that we can't have nice things because
that's exactly
we
right.
are not behaving well.
That's exactly what it is. That's what's happening. People are not behaving well.
Well, I mean, we talked about this, I think, last week when we talked about like over tourism, the Louvre shut down because I think this is an issue. I think that and I was talking about this with my family, and the question becomes like, who's responsible, right? Is it the tourists and the people that are in there who are responsible? Is it the responsibility of the museum to better shore up these pieces? Should there be like timed entries? I mean, we are in this selfie craze. We are in this like meme, and I'm gonna act like the prince, and you know what I mean, and people not being careful. And I think that part of that whole Louvre story too are these guards being taxed by these, people rushing at things, and how does everyone protect themselves? So, right, who?
Yeah, I mean, well, who's responsible in this case? Like, so when we're talking about this one with the painting, right? It was a trip. It was a trip and a fall. Now, he was trying to do a selfie. He was trying to pose like the painting, right? Let's break this down. That definitely predates selfies, right? The idea that somebody would like get in front of a painting and make the thing, or get in front of a statue and do the same pose and then take a picture of it. People have been doing that forever. So there's that piece of it. In this case, it looks like, he could face charges.
Criminal charges.
But I do feel like that there is definitely a lawyer out there who will make the case that one in particular is on the museum because what he tripped over was
but it's a barrier.
But that seems like a pretty like a single step as a barrier is not the best barrier. Now I'm not going to say I agree that it's the museum's fault, but I do think to your point, I think that this has to be figured out. I don't think this is all one thing. right? I think the selfie thing doesn't have to be an issue, and in fact, it can be a very good thing for these museums, but we just got to figure out how to
set up a
get
selfie
through
station or something.
Well, see, but this is what I think is going to happen, because more of this is going to happen. We've already talked about some of this. Lisa, as you say, this is a huge issue at the Louvre. This is partly why they shut the museum down that Monday recently, because the staff was saying, we are contending with way too much. So what are we supposed to do? Put giant stanchions in front of art now so that people can't get anywhere near, which means all the responsible people who want to go see it. Actually, you say plexiglass, but the chair that the person sat on and then ran away from,
that
still looking for that person.
That one is indefensible. Because
they did it on purpose. They waited
for the security guard to leave. Yeah. Then they tried to get real close to take the pictures, and then when they broke the chair,
they sat on it.
It looks like he actually fell back on it accidentally. But
somebody wasn't doing their lunges, so they couldn't hover over the chair.
But then they both pieced out of that gallery and did not say a word to anybody. And which is also how dumb are you? Have you never seen a heist movie? There's definitely cameras in every gallery.
But back to my point. So what are they doing with that chair now? They're putting it under plexiglass. So
exactly.
This is not what we
but
want to experience when we go
together.
to museums. You want to be able to go and see it fairly up close and have some sort of meaningful interaction with it, not be kept 40 feet away because the idiots with the selfie sticks are punching holes in it.
I know. I mean, there's this balance, though, right? There's this, and it's Bezos's wedding, like we talk about, it's the Instagram capital. Now all of a sudden it's becoming the wedding capital. But anyway, you have to have this balance between tourism and capitalism, right? So you have to figure out a way. You still need those people to come into the museum because you need those ticket prices, but you need to set up some sort of fail-safe thing so that your prized art is not under attack.
I think it is as much, though, about the fact that we are in this adolescence in our ability to live with social media, right? And so we as a society collectively need to get our arms around how we are behaving on social media, what is acceptable and what is not. Because I think ultimately, if we're going to have a world where social media is some sort of somewhat healthy and sustainable part of our lives, we all are going to have to figure out a way to do it in a way that is a little bit more rational than it is
and respectful, especially in places that you are,
And that's the issue underlying.
But it's the same.
I'm also mindful that this is art appreciation.
Exactly.
It may not be the way that we all grew up with it because we didn't have the ability to do selfies unless you wanted to bring out your Polaroid or something like that. But this is a level of it, even though it drives me crazy every time I see a selfie happening and the person takes the picture and actually never turns around and looks at the painting itself.
Right.
But still, it is getting people into museums, although as one museum official was describing, they have selfie bucket lists. So run into this gallery, take this photo, and then run over to the Botticelli and take that, and then run over to the Leonardo, punch a hole in its face, and then take a
sit on the chair, break that, put it on your selfie.
Yeah, so this is what's happening. So, I don't envy the museum officials on this one. For sure.
No.
I'm sure there are a lot of selfies happening in our next situation because we moved to Amsterdam now where there is a condom condemnation afoot. Recently, we talked about the 200-year-old condom on view at the Rijksmuseum as part of an exhibition about sex workers. It's made from a sheep's appendix and features an illustration of a nun hoisting up her robes and surrounded by rather aroused clergymen. Now the condom is sparking outrage among religious organizations who are calling the relic an insult to the Catholic Church and the Dutch nation. So we were talking about it a couple of years ago because it was we thought it was rather unusual that they were able to find something like this in mint condition.
Right.
Again, we're featuring it on our GBH News YouTube channel, and it goes to show that there has always been, even 200 years ago, conversations and maybe even jokes or satire about sex, because this nun also, with the text that accompany it, is basically saying this is my choice as she's facing these men, but religious groups are having a problem with it.
I mean, listen.
Lisa doesn't want to take this
I
one.
do. I'm curious, Edgar, what you have to say about this.
So it's a few things. One, I mean, first of all, they have every right to go and do a little protest outside of the museum. I think that's great. I think it is totally cool. And it was a small one. It was 15 people and 5,000 flyers.
Yep.
But that is great. Get out there, make your voice heard, say we have a problem with this. Now, the part where you say it is a grotesque insult to God, the Catholic Church, and the entire Dutch nation, I think maybe you're punching a little. You're punching above your weight on what you're saying there, especially because apparently it's kind of interesting. In the Netherlands, more than 50% identify as having no religion.
Yeah, exactly.
So more than half of the Dutch nation don't even really believe in a god in the way we think of it that way. So really, are you insulting the entire Dutch nation?
I think you're
not.
insulting the nuns. What
Maybe.
about the nuns?
What about the
What about the
nuns?
nuns?
What
like,
about
I
the
mean, I
nuns?
understand that you're insulted. I mean, I understand their point. But the reality is this is an artifact. I mean, I think they scanned it and it wasn't ever used. So it was sort of like maybe it's in a novelty shop. I was fascinated by this because during this, like the 19th century, apparently it was fishermen wives and farmer wives who were tasked with making these condoms.
Huh.
Which I think is very interesting.
That is very
isn't that
we're learning.
out of pig bladder and fish bladder. So,
Yeah.
Well, it was
I think
very industrious. It was also at a time
Yes.
where syphilis was rampant,
Syphilis
so
was
this was
rampant.
important to have things like this. And again, we go back to 200 years ago. There were these conversations. There was a parody of religion. There was a parody of government happening. This is nothing new that something like this could be so sensational.
I think another really important point is to understand, is to look at it in the context of the time, which is to say, like, I feel like this. I'm going to speak from my own
Right.
personal view. I think one of the important sort of roles of the arts is to find a way to speak truth to power or to lampoon power at times. And you have to remember that at the time that this was out there, the Catholic Church was very, very powerful. I mean, they're still very powerful, but certainly not at the level they were then. And so the idea that you got to look at this satire in the context of the time.
Exactly.
That's where I would say I think anybody has a right to sort of kind of poke at somebody who's powerful.
Right, and it was during the French Revolution, right, when the church was very persecuted. Good. That was good.
Poke at somebody who's
I got it. That was good,
Yep,
Edgar.
yep.
Good.
All right, well, our globe, we're going to move on now. Our globe-trotting continues to England, where the Bristol Museum and Art Gallery has launched a one-week crowdfunding campaign to buy a J.M.W. Turner painting. It's scheduled to be auctioned at Sotheby's next week. Turner created the work when he was just 17, and it's believed to be his only painting depicting a Bristol scene. He's somebody who would travel the countryside and just sit down, and there are lots of sketches of this countryside, but again, this is the only painting, and this is really a sweet story because this community really wants to bring it home.
And I'm wondering, apparently they're the only bidders. It's going up to auction on July 2nd at Sotheby's. I know, that's what we were saying.
Question mark.
It's question mark. They've raised $100,000. They think
in
the
like 5
piece
days.
is. I
In
know.
like
they
5
think
days,
the piece
which is
is worth like $200,000 to $300,000. So let's see how that goes. I'm sure, but like in any art auction, you never know. I mean, you're right. I think it's maybe someone will be like buy it and give it to them because I think it is a really sweet story. And I was reminded that the MFA owns a Turner, the slave ship, and so we know how amazing, right? And most of his work goes for $30 million. So I was like, why is this only $200,000?
I couldn't figure that out
because
either.
it's an earlier work. Apparently,
He was 17.
He was 17,
yeah.
and so that doesn't have as much provenance as something that.
Speaking of
but I
provenance,
would
though,
think that it would be worth more money.
The backstory of this painting is just as interesting as this
Which,
story.
by the way, we'll put up on our screens as Edgar is talking about
the
it.
fact that for 150 years nobody sort of knew that this
They thought
was
it
a Turner.
Watercolor?
No. They didn't know it was a Turner. So he exhibited it in 1793, the year after he painted it, and then it sort of got miscatalogued, ended up in a private collection, etc. It was actually auctioned off last year. For
by the same owner for $506.
Yeah. £506 because they didn't know it was a Turner. Then the person who bought it for £500+ at auction got it cleaned, and when they cleaned it, it revealed Turner's name. Now they know it's a Turner, and then they connected the dots and said, "Oh, it's this painting that we knew existed, but nobody knew where it was."
I
so
think that's amazing that
amazing.
it was mistaken for a watercolor, and because Turner never did watercolors, he only did oils.
But
so
no, he did. Yeah, he did watercolors too.
Oh, but I mean, I think that's amazing that you find these. It's like go to your yard sales because you never know.
And crucially, Jared, the Bristol Museum and Art Gallery, which the city council there owns and where they would put it, is a free museum. So
so it would be open to
if they
the public.
Win this auction and are able to purchase this, it will be free to all to take as many selfies as they want in front of it.
I have high hopes for them because
I do too.
Any museum would love to have a Turner in its collection.
Yes.
His works are so revered, and I mean, of course, he's one of the preeminent British painters, the Turner Prize, and Britain is named after him.
Yes.
But we know that there will be private collectors who will be out there wanting to have this too, who can probably easily outspend this museum.
Absolutely.
So
I'm
think
hoping too. I mean, I know they're the only public bidder right now, but I'm just hoping. So on July 2nd, that's when it's going to happen,
week.
and that's when we'll see.
Maybe Jeff Bezos will say, I'm giving all of this stuff to Italy, and I'm giving this to England for my wedding gift
also
to
that
people.
it's Bristol, right? It's
I
not like
know.
London. It's like it's a part of the, it's you really.
It's a part of their history, right? I'm pulling for them
Come
too.
on, Bristol.
I'm pulling for them
Well,
too.
we will keep. We won't be here next Friday because it's the 4th of July holiday,
Right.
but we will keep posted and
Yes.
keep people posted about this. Well, coming up, Boston Calling is turning down the volume and taking a gap year. That conversation is next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
Fast fashion's cheap, trendy clothes can land quickly in a donation pile or the trash. Huge amounts of discarded clothing ends up in the Atacama Desert in Chile.
And this become a new illegal business where the people goes and just throw the clothes in the desert.
But there may be a new fix. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, helping families overcome the college planning stress. Committed to providing trusted guidance with calculators, step-by-step videos, and more. Details at mefa.org. And Subaru of New England. You can explore New England in the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Forester Hybrid. Subaru retailer locations at subaruofnewengland.com. And Acera School in Winchester, committed to cultivating curiosity for grades K through 9, from woodworking to fine arts, engineering, and physics. Acera's teachers are dedicated to unlocking each student's potential. More at aceraschool.org.
Hi, I'm Gal Zipperman-Lotan, bringing you GBH Daily, a newsletter to help you stay informed, not overwhelmed. You can subscribe today and get it in your inbox at gbh.org/daily. That's gbh.org/daily.
I'm Jared Bowen. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review. I'm joined by co-hosts Edgar B. Herwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. We're going over the latest headlines, which includes Boston Calling. The music festival is known for featuring up-and-comers such as Chapel Roan. This is her performing last year. The festival, which launched in 2013, is calling it off, announcing it will skip next year and return in June. That's significant, too.
Yeah.
Not Memorial Day, but June of 2027. So we didn't really know much about why this was happening, but organizers of Boston Calling posted on their website they would take the year off, and then this prompted Mayor Michelle Wu, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, of course, told WBZ News Radio that Boston Calling had contacted her to share why they were going on hiatus.
Because next year will be so busy between the 250th anniversary celebrations, between FIFA coming, that there will just be a lot of strain on hotel rooms and events and sponsorships. And so given all that is happening in that exact same window in Boston, that it'd be better not to have different sponsorships that are conflicting or stretched too thin, and really do it right so that we can enjoy the Boston Calling event bigger and better when it does come back.
But we are journalists, so we will exercise some scrutiny here and maybe skepticism. Not discrediting the mayor, but
reasonable explanation.
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean, I think a lot of people are thinking through this. I mean, we do our festival in June. We're sort of thinking, like, we know it's going to be a drain on this. We know that hotel rooms and all these things are going to happen. So I mean, I understand that. But there are also other issues with Boston Calling that I think they need to work out.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Jared. To me, the story here is the fact that they said they're going to come back, and then they put this different date out there, which I think is part of this story potentially here in early June, as opposed to Memorial Day, where it's been. You also had, I mean, to my eye, this year's festival, this year's Boston Calling, was a little bit of a departure. They had sort of gone from, and by the way, I kudos to Boston Calling. I remember the very first one and being like, this isn't going to work. And then they grew up, and they were doing great. But it became clear, I think, this year they went from what I think prior to had been really much more up-and-coming artists, much more kind of aimed at younger people. This year it was clearly much more of a nostalgia situation, which sort of implies you're aiming for a little bit of an older audience, maybe an audience with more disposable income to pay the high ticket prices to go to the festival. So you could look at this and say it seems like they're trying to figure out how to make this work going forward, that there's a little bit of a how do we do this going forward.
And the other growth part is, Edgar, you're talking about going to the first one, and if memory serves,
City Hall Plaza.
It was City Hall Plaza, and there were local people who were putting on this festival, but now Live Nation has a large ownership stake in this, and there is some reporting saying that there's a lot of friction right now happening because of the interests that Live Nation has as a huge for-profit entity in making this as successful as possible, and that maybe wasn't compatible with other people's thoughts.
And it's always really difficult when you have sort of like a founder organization, but you're right, it really started for younger folks to come out and on City Hall Plaza, and it was a really, it had its own controversy because of some political stuff, but I do think that having a big organization like Live Nation come in, they're obviously going to, upend things. There's going to be new leadership. You have to take a year off in order to figure out what that's going to be. So, I think it's the perfect time because you have a perfect excuse to say because of all the things that are happening. But it'll be very interesting to see when it comes back in June, and everything happens in June. Could they pick another month? But it'll be very interesting to see how it comes back with the influence of Live Nation.
Yeah, and I think also if it comes back,
I
there are so many times where we are told, oh, this is coming back, and stay tuned for 2027,
also,
and then it quietly fades away.
Music festivals are hard to keep going for many, many years, so, we'll see.
BAMS Fest is, another one that happens in June.
Exactly.
Which happens on tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of local institutions, the Boston Public Library's Roxbury branch is poised to be renamed in honor of Sarah Ann Shaw, the city's first black female television news reporter who had a decades-long career at WBZ, not to mention GBH as part of Say Brother, which became Basic Black, which is now Rooted. And she had a huge media presence as a journalist who covered a community that for so long was not covered. And also, I loved reading this, that she was very integrated with that library branch and making sure that it was run well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah Ann Shaw is such an icon in the community, but even outside of the community and all the things that she's done. We're talking about a lot of firsts, right? We're going to be talking about Barbara Walters. We're talking about Anna Wintour. I think that, especially during her time, she died at 90, and I think that in her lifetime, she was so much of an advocate for her community. She's, it says in the article that she was a Boston Public School grad. She was actually a girls' Latin school graduate, which is a little different. But I just think that she has been committed to that branch. She was very much part of the Athenaeum Fund and on the Dudley Library. So I think it's a huge honor. And I think when you do this, it really helps carry people's legacy so you don't forget. And so you're always, you walk in the library, it's named after her. Now you're going to try to figure out who that is. And I think that that's a really a wonderful way to honor somebody.
Yeah, and it's also, there's nothing about this story that is not good. You know what I mean? Which is really nice. It is nice to have just a really nice story, but it's also, it is that thing of, it makes me feel like a citizen of a place, right?
Right.
The idea that this is a library, which is a civic institution, and this is, there's so many things, like stadiums now are always like naming rights, and it's billions of dollars and, sponsorship, and I get it, everybody's trying to raise money to do stuff, but it's like no money changed hands here, right? This is literally, they're saying, here's a person whose legacy needs to be remembered, and here's a public institution that we're going to put her name on, and everything about it makes sense. Like you said, Jared, not only like a trailblazer, not only an incredible journalist for all these years, but also just a citizen in her neighborhood who was committed to the library.
As we can hear right here, here's a sample of the work that Sarah Ann Shaw shared with her audience across the Commonwealth over the course of her 30-some-odd-year career.
It costs you nothing but time to return a phone call,
to mentor a student, to volunteer a few hours to help an organization, to listen to someone's story.
The Porter's House Shelter isn't the only program that Women Incorporated operates. Empowering children to survive and succeed is you can't start too young. The city's Housing Inspection Department received 60 calls today about heat problems. I want to assure viewers that despite my absence, it does not and should not mean that your stories will not get told.
Sarah Ann Shaw, TV4, Eyewitness News, State House.
As I'm hearing that, I'm also reminded of the fact that it's so rare that somebody would spend so much time at a local station or any station for that matter, but it also demonstrated the commitment she had to her community. As her family pointed out, this library naming is so apt because she was a proud daughter of Roxbury.
Right. No, exactly. And I think that, the neighborhood is changing, and when you have the changing neighborhoods, it's always nice to have that sort of like legacy and that especially in her name. So I think it's home.
Well, as you mentioned, Lisa, we're going to be talking about Barbara Walters because we're on to another trailblazer. This week, Hulu dropped a new documentary about Walters' career called Tell Me Everything, and it tells the story of how she fought sexism throughout her career, broadcast landmark interviews, and reshaped the entire concept of newsmaker interviews. Here's an example of when she was interviewing Vladimir Putin.
I'm going to ask you a terrible question. Did you ever order anyone killed?
Нет.
That was a long pause.
Yeah, there was quite. I don't think you needed translation for that one.
Define killed, right?
So, but this is the thrust of this documentary: is not only did the path that she had to carve coming out from all of these men who did not want her to have any screen time, who did not want her to have any credibility. She had to go leave the anchor desk, go out into the field, and that proved to be a really good thing because this is how she got all of the interviews she got over the years, where she would ask people questions about their marriage or their childhood, but also not be afraid at all to ask a dictator if he had killed people. And the documentary argues how much she transformed our notions of what interviews can and maybe should be.
Are you a Barbara Walters fan?
Yes.
I mean, do you think of yourself?
I grew up with
Barbara
Walters.
Yeah.
I think that I think just like all of these other women. I mean, I think that it was hard, and you had to make really hard choices to be in that field, which was a very male-dominated field. So I think that what she did and how I think she did transform the interview process. I think that every time I would watch her, I'm like, oh my God, she's going to make that person cry. And it wasn't like I know, but because she asked the hard questions. So I think you're right. I think she sort of changed the way and what was acceptable to ask in questions. But she really wanted to get to the root of whoever she was interviewing.
Yeah.
And her style, people didn't love her style, but I do think that it took her a long way.
Yeah. I think this documentary is pretty good. It's a really good watch. There are some moments in it that there's a moment where which I think is just absolutely fascinating, where she arrives. There's going to be a summit in the Middle East, right? And Anwar Sadat is on the runway, and Walter Cronkite's there, and so is she. And he responds to her. And he's kind of like, Walter Cronkite, I know you're trying to get in here, but leave me alone. I want to talk to Barbara. And you see that. It's really powerful. It's a powerful reminder. And the other thing is, I think, I like this documentary because footage, I still believe in footage, in seeing things, right? And I think we're at a time, and you look at somebody like Barbara Walters, and we hear a lot. Right? We hear a lot about this sort of narrative that you're talking about, which is absolutely true, that women had to face this and that. But in this, you actually, especially in the early years, you see how these other newsmen are treating her, and it is shocking. They are awful to her. And so I think that is a really powerful thing, especially for younger people as we look into the future, to see this is how it happened. This is what we're talking about when we say women were facing this stuff. When you see it, it's kind of like, wow, that guy is awful.
So she had to have the strength to do this. And by the way, she's a daughter of Boston. She was born here. Her father had his first nightclub here, which, by the way, she said that's the reason she was never truly intimidated by celebrities, because she saw them up close through her father's nightclub. And so then she knew that they were real human beings and they weren't just this veneer to be afraid of. So that was part of the reason she could ask these questions. But what I thought was really interesting from this documentary is making the point that she really changed our nation, or she did change the nation, but also changed our notion of what celebrity was. does in making people more real by asking these questions. And also, as Katie Couric points out, she's one of the voices in this piece that she was Cribs before Cribs, because Barbara Walters would go into people's homes and sit down with them. There was this great conversation you see with her having with Bette Midler in her home, or Eddie Murphy sitting on his rug in his home. So she got in their space and was almost like a friend, but as Bette Midler also pointed out, she was a friend, but I also knew she was always a journalist.
Yes.
And we know that she was very clear-headed about how she wanted to rise to the top at really no expense and enter into the Diane Sawyer. Barbara Walters booking feuds at ABC.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't know that. That's something that I didn't know, that they had this feud. I can see it, and you can see it happening, as Diane Sawyer is coming on. But you're right. I mean, I think that's the thing. You can't lose sight of the fact that she's a journalist, that she wanted to fight for every story. That whole Oprah story when she talks about Monica Lewinsky, and she basically undercuts her, and it ends up going to Barbara Walters. But because that's
70 million people watch that.
70 million people.
Crazy.
But that's what you need to do, right? To fight for those stories.
But Jared, you mentioned her talking about being in her father's nightclub when she's younger, and not only do you see in this, I think not only is it that she wasn't intimidated by these celebrities, but that is a through line through everything. The Cribs thing is part of that. She talks about the fact that I'd watch them on stage, but then I'd also see them sitting on the couch backstage, just having a beer or whatever. And that idea of not only is she not intimidated by them, but there is a real person under there, is kind of what she's doing through all of this, whether it's a world leader or a celebrity.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's exactly right, Edgar. I think you're spot on, is that she knew that these people had these other lives, and they weren't just what you see on the TV or you hear on the radio.
They're
that I want
to
get into that deeper. Right.
Yeah.
And I know we're moving on, but I'll just say I think one of the most salient bites comes from Oprah Winfrey, who says, well, there will never be another basically Oprah or Barbara, because she almost spoiled her own success, because now everybody does it themselves. Everybody goes on Instagram. They share their lives. They take you into their home. They share their inner thoughts. You used to need somebody to pull that out of you. You don't necessarily need that anymore. Well, we also want to take a moment to remember Bill Moyers, the former White House press secretary turned acclaimed TV journalist, who died yesterday at age 91. At PBS, he had a huge presence, hosting shows and producing series, including Joseph Campbell and The Power of the Myth and The Secret Government. So obviously a huge force in American television, and an epic loss in the terms of both the service he had in government and in broadcast media. Well, this means it's time for our lightning round. Lisa, what's the story that struck you this week?
So the story that struck me this week is Stephen Shames, who has a major exhibition entitled Black Panther: The Revolution. It's in London. It's in a gallery, but he's the largest collection of Black Panther photos. And the reason why it's important, and I think the photos that he gained access. I think about it as that movie Almost Famous, where he actually Cameron Crowe. Cameron Crowe is this guy did the same thing. He traveled with the Panthers. So this particular photograph exhibit really looks at the Panthers in a different way, not in a militant way, but in a family way. They did so many amazing things for community, for kids, and I think that there's such a large part of that narrative missing, and this particular photographer has captured that. So if you're going to London, you can go see the exhibit, but I just wanted to bring that to the forefront.
Edgar, what's the story that caught your attention?
What caught my attention is just kind of I find it to be fascinating, the fact that, do we know the band U2, or are we fans of the band U2? I think of U2 as the most Irish thing you can be. Well, two of the members of U2 were not born in Ireland, including The Edge. Even though The Edge moved to Ireland when he was 1, he became an Irish citizen this week after living in Ireland for 62 years. At the age of 63, he became an Irish citizen.
Wow.
He said he was a little tardy on the paperwork. But, it is interesting because he did talk about the fact that he's glad to do it now because he's particularly proud of the way Ireland is, as he says, leading the world stage right now. And it's interesting to note that people from 140 different countries became citizens of Ireland this week as well. So it's a reminder that immigration is happening all over the place. People are moving from place to place. It's pretty normal.
Well, the story that caught my attention was the Library of Congress announced that it had acquired the manuscripts and papers of Stephen Sondheim, which is, speaking of things you didn't know, I didn't know he was a graduate of Williams College. I don't know how I had missed that. But yeah, he went to Williams College, and they have 5,000 pieces that they have collected. And it's everything from his notes about his insights into characters. Actually, one of my favorite songs of all time is Send in the Clowns, because it is such an extraordinary song. And he has apparently he wrote a whole one-page inner monologue for Desiree, who sings this in A Little Night Music, about what she's thinking as she's singing this song, which is Send in the Clowns, because it's basically too late in my career. It's just a heartbreaking song. So this is going to be a treasure trove for researchers who want to further understand his musical theater legacy, because we have all of his insights. So they are at the Library of Congress, which means if it's still open...
I was going to say, are we going to be able to see it? I don't know.
Then people can actually pick the papers up.
Yes, you can go. And by the way, he did this because he saw the Gershwin collection at the Library of Congress. So this is why he wanted to give to it. Well, that's all for this edition of The Culture Show. You can tune in Monday for writer Andre Asselman on his new book featuring a series of novellas in which the Call Me By Your Name author returns to romance, and Julia Swanson of the Art Walk Project takes us on a tour of New Bedford Public Art. Lisa, this is the end of the Roxbury International Film Festival for this year. What can people do?
It is the last day, and we are at the Museum of Fine Arts starting at 4:30 and going until 10.
So procrastinators, now is your time.
Now is your time. Now there's still tickets.
And I'm sure it's really fun, the ending celebrations.
It is. It's going to be amazing.
And Edgar, what's coming up on the Curiosity Desk?
Just going to make one more pitch for our big episode about the Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919. It is up on YouTube now, and we'll have airings Saturday at 6:30 and Sunday at 5 o'clock on GBH2 if you want to watch it on television.
Which I do, because I want my answer whether you can really still smell the molasses in the north end.
When it gets really hot.
Well, thanks today to engineer Bill Piacciatelli, the BPL technical and logistics crew, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, Pat Lally, and Olivia Corshio. Also thanks to Lennox Hotel, the Newsfeed Cafe. Thank you to everybody who came down here to see us at the library today. We love seeing you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jared Bowen. Have an art-filled weekend, but don't sit on, punch, or drop the art.
No.
Have a great day.
Stay.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library!
Paula plays Vivaldi next.
Classical Radio Boston is WCRB-FM 99.5 HD1 Lowell, Boston, WGBH-FM HD2 Boston, WCAI-FM HD2 Woods Hole, WJMF-FM Smithfield, Providence, and at classical.org.
Just about 3 o'clock, we are cruising through this Friday afternoon. Vivaldi's Violin Concerto in G continues that cruise. Here's violinist Giuliano Carmagnola and the Venice Baroque Orchestra led by Andrea Marcone.